the 5280 Bums podcast. Kaushik, Kannan, Nissen-Pickard. How are you doing, my brother?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. It's been a great week. Some exciting games for us. And it seemed like every receiver, we've got a lot of receivers we're talking about today. Every receiver that came back from injury really balled out, right? So really excited to get into this. Receiver is my favorite position, Charlie. But yeah, just overall great weekend. Enjoyed my football. Hope you did as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was electric weekend from Thursday night. The what do they call that? Like the Veteran Bowl or something like that between Aaron Rodgers and
Yeah.
Joe Flacco Sunday night, and then even Monday had some great games. With the Texans and Buccaneers and stuff like that as well. So I'm excited, and let's dive into it, shall we?
Absolutely. I was waiting for this one, Charlie. So first guy on our winners list is Ja'Marr Chase, right? And, we've talked about this in previous weeks. You guys have seen me with the Ja'Marr Chase jersey on. He's one of my favorite players in the league. And no surprises, he's the first guy on our winners list. Absolutely insane game, Charlie. 16 receptions on 23 targets, 161 yards and a touchdown, 38.1 PPR fantasy points. Where do I get started with this guy, right? I'm a big fan, and I think this was the game that was really the coming out party. We look for this with these top draft picks, and I think this was really that coming out party for Chase, because one of the arguments for why this guy is maybe not better than Justin Jefferson, because he gets compared to Justin Jefferson quite a bit, is he's so dependent on Joe Burrow. He's never really played with any quarterback besides Joe Burrow. I guess all you need to do is just put Joe whoever, and when they throw the ball to Ja'Marr Chase, he's going to have a great game. Joe Flacco in this case. But yeah, absolutely insane. Some of the notes here: 51% target share, which is absolutely ridiculous, right? Think about that. More than half the team's pass attempts are going to him. And this is against a Steelers team that knows the Bengals want to throw the ball, especially with a guy like Joe Flacco. Very low mobility, almost no mobility, let's call it, right? He's very old. And he just continues to go to Ja'Marr Chase. And so it was just really great to see those guys on the same page. 23 targets was a franchise single game records for targets in a game. And so just really excited for Ja'Marr. It seems like he's going to get the kind of involvement and attention in this offense that he should, as a guy that many of us drafted as the first overall pick. And I think that bodes well for a lot of us fantasy owners that were nervous early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly exciting to see him break out, dude. Shout out to Joe Flacco. Shout out to the Browns. I mean, I know Mike Tomlin was incredibly happy to see him get traded over, as Flacco faced him for probably a decade when he was with Baltimore. So he knows the defense of the Steelers incredibly well. The Steelers went out and spent all that money, and obviously it hasn't, bode well for them early in the season, about halfway through now. And Jamar's an absolute monster. You can single this guy, you can double him. I mean, a couple weeks ago when they played the Packers, he's going down in the right corner of the end zone, gets doubled, absolutely gets held for a PI, comes through with that. And this week it's no different. I mean, to have a 51% target share shows that he's the bona fide number one pick that a lot of people had coming into this fantasy season. And I think it kind of proves, rightfully so, that he may be that number one receiver in the league, especially with Justin Jefferson kind of facing a similar situation with the QB battle uphill in Minnesota. I'm just excited for him, man. We talked about it. I said before the week, I want you to wear the Ja'Marr jersey. He obviously had a busy day, so you forgot it. We'll hold it on to next week, because I can expect him to have another big game. And I love it, dude. The guy's electric, and I think everybody should be excited with the remainder of the season. And moving forward, man, to these next two guys too, I think a lot of people should be hyped about them as well, with the situation that's kind of been uncertain, so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Great segue there. These guys, it seems like they're always on our list, Charlie, because it's just like up and down with this offense. And the guys we're talking about are Devontae Smith and AJ Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, of course. And I think the big note here is the Eagles finally threw the damn ball. I think there was something that AJ Brown said after that second touchdown catch. I'm not going to repeat it on this podcast, but it seemed like he was really happy that they were actually throwing the ball and making a commitment to throwing the ball in this game. This is a game, this is a tough defense. Brian Flores loves to get after the quarterback, loves to rush, especially, Jalen Hurts is not a young passer by any means, but, anybody that's kind of still developing as a passer, those guys get confused, right, against the different looks that Brian Flores throws at them. And especially the Eagles really couldn't get the run game going. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this podcast. But it seemed like this was kind of a one-dimensional offense. I mean, that first drive, Jalen Hurts on 4th and 5 finds AJ Brown. They get it going, kind of like last season, that 4th down play down the sidelines. it's just nice to see them get going. The stats here, Devontae Smith, 9 receptions on 11 targets for 183 yards and a touchdown, 33.3 PPR points. And then A.J. Brown, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns, 28.1 PPR points. And so, it's clear that this offense can be efficient when it funnels targets to its top 2 players when it comes to pass catching. And I think that bodes well, right? They don't need to be a very high volume pass attack. They just need to be an efficient passing attack. And I think they're slowly starting to figure this out, that they don't need to just simply throw 1 or 2 deep bombs a game, that they can actually find these guys underneath. Devontae Smith had several underneath catches. A.J. Brown coming back to the football once. And they even hit A.J. Brown on a deep dig route late in that game for that second touchdown. And so it's really great to see these guys on the same page, connecting. Tough matchup as well. And so hopefully this can carry forward for this Eagles team because, worrying signs for me when they're running the ball.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about running the ball. That just hasn't been existent at all this year. Saquon with a lot of people were drafted high. But these guys, when you have 2 bona fide, I'm going to call it Devonta Smith, a wide receiver 1. There's a reason this guy won Heisman in college. He was a freaking electric runner. You can play him everywhere around the field. A.J. Brown, we know what he's done. He did it with freaking Ryan Tannehill for years in Tennessee. And that's no slight on Ryan Tannehill. It's just that offense was geared around Derrick Henry, another power workhorse running back. And to finally have them break out, that bodes well for this team. And I mean, Nick Sirianni as well, kind of getting that job security. We know their offense has kind of been back and forth. It's ebbed and flowed a lot this season. They've been trying to get the run game started because they've talked about it a lot, that their game, when they're at their peak, is predicated on being able to run the football. And then that opens up the passing game. But I think maybe they have to flip it up this year and do a little bit of inverse, get Jalen Hurts cooking. That way defenses kind of back off. They don't load the box as much, and maybe that will open up for Saquon. But to have these a duo like this, you mentioned it, 33 points for Devonta Smith, 28 for A.J. Brown. Both had, combined 300 passing or reception yards is elite. And they go against a Giants defense that is absolutely porous. And we've seen them get lit up. And actually, we're going to talk a little bit about them with Bo Nix later on in the show. If anybody watched the football games this weekend, 33 points in the fourth quarter is got to be a record, if not close to a record. So they have plenty of opportunities moving forward, just as the guy that you're going to talk about next does with the Los Angeles Rams, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlie, you're getting good at these transitions. So great. Let's move on to the next guy. And Charlie, this is your boy, right? So we're getting both our boys out, the first 4. Devontae Adams of the Los Angeles Rams. And he had 5 receptions on 8 targets for 35 yards, nothing crazy yardage-wise. But it seemed like many of those were high-value targets because 3 touchdowns in this game and finishes with 26.5 PPR fantasy points, so 26.5. And it seems, Charlie, like all this guy does right now is he lives to score touchdowns and maybe eat some Taco Bell on the side. I know he's in some of those Taco Bell commercials. But it seems like all he's doing is scoring touchdowns. And I think the nice thing about this game, when the game started, I know teams sometimes take a bit to adapt to London. They were talking about on the broadcast that the Rams had flown into London, I think, a lot later than the Jags. The Jags were in London earlier. And so, jet lag and everything like that. But it seemed like the Rams were able to settle into this game much quicker. But even early in that game, it seemed like maybe they weren't hitting Devontae Adams as much. They missed him on that very first play on a play action corner route. Didn't really throw him the ball as much. But then, when it came down to the red zone, Matt Stafford was only looking for one guy after that first touchdown, which was Devontae Adams, right? Finding him on 3 different occasions, made a really tough catch as well, had a one-handed catch in the red zone on a pretty tightly thrown ball. Like Matt Stafford, how he likes to fire that ball in there, very gunslinger mentality. But this is the Devontae we love to see, right? Like doesn't have to be super high yardage, but he's going to see high volume of targets. And those targets are going to be high value targets. They're going to be in the red zone. They're going to be scoring opportunities. And I think at this stage of his career, he is very productive as a WR2 with weekly WR1 upside. Doesn't need to be the guy that completely takes over the game like he was in his early years as a Packer, because you have Puka Nacua there, right? You've got Kyron Williams. You've got other players that can take that load off of him. But what a great rejuvenation for this guy, right? Like, especially after the seasons with the Raiders, didn't really win anything. Now he's on a winning team. He's really seeming to feel that energy. And of course, Puka being out, I think that was a big benefit this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. And Puka is apparently going to be back after the bye week they have here this week 8. So he'll be back in week 9. But I still like it for Devontae overall. I mean, to get that connection, it's similar to what we saw in Dallas with Pickens kind of taking over with CeeDee Lamb being out. And I'm not saying Davante Adams can run as fast as Pickens or kind of be that X receiver as much as he was back in the past, but he can be a red zone guy. You talked about it. If you're getting those 3 touchdowns, only 5 receptions, but 3 of those are touchdowns, 35 yards, that means you're a trusted go-to gadget guy. You can throw it up into those corners of the end zones. You mentioned that one-handed catch he had. That's a guy that really builds trust. Stafford is known to spread the ball around. I mean, he had 21 completions on 33 attempts this week, only 183 yards, but he did have 5 touchdowns, meaning they were incredibly efficient when they got within that 20-yard line area. And I love him, man. I've always loved Davante Adams. He's always been one of my favorite Packers. I hope one day he gets his jersey retired there because I think he's deserving of it. He's been just elite everywhere he goes. He's a for sure first ballot Hall of Famer. And I'm super happy for him, as you mentioned, that he's back in a positive winning situation. And hopefully they can continue to rack up those dubs. And if Puka's out, that just means more eats for my boy. So.
Absolutely. More chalupas, right? Less touchdowns, more chalupas, it sounds like.
I'm going to get that tatted, man.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So next guy we've got is Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. I think this is the first time he's coming up on this podcast. And so, notable stats here. I think he's been trending up for quite some time, but hasn't really had that breakout game. And I think this was the start of this breakout for him. 5 receptions on 7 targets, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 26.8 PPR points against the Bears defense. It seems like maybe there's a bit of a changing of the guard in New Orleans right now. Rashid Shaheed has been this dependable deep threat for them. It seems like this guy has 1 or maybe 2 game-breaking plays, like really long deep routes every game. But it was interesting to see in this game that Chris Olave started to become that guy down the field for Spencer Rattler, right? Where they're pushing the ball down the field, also becoming a red zone option, right? Runs that great in route on a DB, plucks the ball out of the air. He's not a very tall guy, but reached quite high to grab that ball and then had another touchdown later in the game. And so it's nice to see him get this kind of involvement in this offense. I think when he was drafted out of Ohio State, he was drafted to be the clear WR1 in that system. And I think slowly, it's taken some time with Chris Olave. He's sort of slow burned his way to this point, but I think he's in a great spot right now. The Saints don't really have too much to play for at this point in the season, but I think they're going to still try to win games. This is not a franchise that by any means is trying to tank per se, or just like lose it all for a high draft pick next season. I think they're still going to be in games. They're still a pretty good team. And Spencer Rattler, I think, is taking much better care of the ball. He's going to have his errors. He's still kind of an erratic guy, younger passer. But it seems like, as I said, a little bit of a changing of the guard here in that system. The question here is this going to continue? And also, health of Chris Olave, right? We know he's had some health issues in the past. And so as long as health stays on his side, I think this positive touchdown regression will continue.
Yeah, I mean, what I think I like most for them is the fact that you mentioned it, is he's playing with kind of an erratic QB out there. Did take some time. Shaheed has been the man. That's why a lot of people probably took him above Olave. However, as we know, within the last 5 years, that Ohio State wide receivers, man, they're for sure handed. It's kind of like LSU at this point. If you can go get a guy, they're going to be good. They're going to be solid. They may not be day one breakout stars, but that's okay. The Saints haven't been good recently. They went out and paid Derek Carr all that money. Unfortunately, he went and retired before this season. They thought he was going to be the guy for the next 2 or 3 years. Spencer Rattler steps in, kind of didn't have his greatest showing when he was out South Carolina after he transferred from Oklahoma. I mean, the Saints are 1-6, man, and you're putting up stuff like this with a QB who isn't, super elite. Alvin Kamara hasn't looked as good as he has in the past. We know their offense is in year 1 under Kellen Moore, so there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a whole new playbook, a whole new system, and that's got to be very positive for them. We know this QB class isn't necessarily strong coming up in 2026. However, the Saints as a team aren't necessarily well-rounded, so they can go up, get some more guys, on the defense, build up in there. Olave is not going to have any threats offensively outside of Shaheed. On the tight end spot, they only have, Jawan Johnson, who is solid. I do really like him. But overall, I don't think offensively there's a lot of true threats. And, 2027 is when they can get a real QB. And this guy's going to be special, man. So if you're able to go out and get him, go out, buy him up, maybe somebody has him stashed away on their bench and they need some area, they're in need of some other areas, pick him up, man, because you have some great opportunities for him. And this next guy, dude, I think a lot of people picked up within the last 2 weeks, or did also have him stashed on the bench, like in those early draft processes.
Yeah, this is Rashid Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs that we're referring to. And what a story, man. This is not an ideal situation for him at the beginning of the season. Serves a 6-game suspension, had some offseason issues, and so served that suspension. And I think many of us were curious as to the state of this Chiefs offense, especially with those early games that they lost. They were kind of behind the 8 ball. We weren't sure if there'd be a changing of the guard in the AFC West with how well the Chargers were playing early in the season. Broncos kind of were sputtering a bit, but we're still winning games. We're still close in many games. And so we thought, hey, the Chiefs are done. They're out. But looks like they just needed Rashid Rice back. Comes back in this week, 7 receptions on 10 targets, 42 yards. Not great in terms of yardage. But again, a lot of that was game script dependent. They had this game in the bag quite early, but 2 touchdowns, Charlie, and 23.2 PPR fantasy points. And I think it's crazy to say this, but I genuinely think this is a floor game for Rashid Rice. The reason is game script wise, as I mentioned, the Chiefs had this game in the bag. Patrick Mahomes, after that second touchdown, goes to Rashid Rice and basically was like, we can do this all day, right? Like we can hit these routes all day. This guy is a dependable threat underneath on those intermediate routes, can also go deep and burn DBs on the outside. There's really nothing this guy can't do. And nothing better than seeing Patrick Mahomes with a no-look pass to Rashid Rice in his first game back. And these guys are just on the same page. Rashid Rice plucks that ball out of the air, no problem. Points right back at Mahomes. Seems like they have that connection right back and looks for him on that back shoulder near the goal line. So that trust factor is clearly there. Rashid was the first guy to score in this game, I believe. But yeah, as I mentioned, I think this is a floor game. The Chiefs are playing against an opponent that they clearly had beat, that they clearly could have worn down. I think they pulled their starters pretty early in the second half, or I don't even know if the starters played the second half here. So I think better days to come for Rashid Rice, as scary as that sounds for those that are playing against him. But yeah, what a story. Great to see this guy back and great to see him balling as always.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for the guy, at least from a fantasy perspective. Obviously, off the field stuff is a different story, and I don't want to get too into that. But overall, man, to be kind of that effective right when you step in, a lot of guys struggle, especially it's similar to coming back from an injury. You don't have OTAs, you don't have preseason. How is it going to look? Because there's practice shape and there's game shape. And to come in, score that first touchdown is huge. You mentioned this is kind of his floor. Yes, he had a lot of receptions as far as 7 on 10 targets, but the yards weren't there. We've seen how fast he can get out when they put him in and have him run deep down the field and hit those seams. Him and kind of Xavier Worthy both have that ability to stretch and bend the defenses. I do like this upcoming matchup for him versus the Commanders this next week. Commanders just got hung, I think it was like 44 on them by the Cowboys. So there's definitely a huge opportunity for him to boom and even get more comfortable and maybe even, sit in the second half again, because that helps later on in the season, those week 12 through 17 games for Kansas City or any team really, when you can kind of rest up. And this gets them more integrated in the playbook. When you're up big, you can kind of try some things that you maybe want to try out in practice that you don't get the opportunity to in a close game. Put them in different positions on the field, different packages. And overall, Rashid Rice owners have to be ecstatic with what they saw out of him this past weekend, as well as the next guy who also came back from not a suspension, but a huge injury, Kaushik.
Absolutely, Charlie. This is another guy that I'm very excited about. Charlie knows this. I've got like 5 guys that I call my boys as wide receivers. This is a guy that's part of that 5-some, if you will, right? Like CeeDee Lamb, Dallas Cowboys. One of my favorite players in the league, has actually helped me win a fantasy championship. 5 receptions on 8 targets this week in a return back, 110 yards and a touchdown, 22 PPR fantasy points. And what a welcome back. As you mentioned, Charlie, he had that, I think it was a high ankle sprain injury against the Bears that he suffered. Left that game pretty early. I actually went to that game. So that was a few weeks back. I was excited to see CeeDee Lamb play. That was my first Bears game. And lo and behold, he goes out within, I think, the first or second series. So I was really bummed out. Wanted to see him feast against that Bears defense like many other receivers have. But great to see this, man. Great to see this against the Commanders. Big divisional showdown at home. CeeDee Lamb comes back. Big boost for this offense. George Pickens has been doing the bulk of the work as a WR1 option the past few weeks. But we know where CeeDee belongs, right? He's one of the top 5 wide receivers in football. That big play upside is just game breaking for him. And that's something that exists every week, right? Because this is going to be a very high value or high volume passing offense. This team tends to be in a lot of close games, a lot of shootouts. And yeah, it's great to see him scoring from 74 yards out. It seemed like Dak kind of threw that ball as a CD down there somewhere ball. It looked like CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens were kind of crossing. But yeah, CeeDee Lamb, high value target guy in this offense. I think this game, again, due to game script, maybe he wasn't as involved in the second half because it felt like the Cowboys kind of had it put away, especially the Jaden Daniels injury didn't help matters for Washington. But yeah, I think this is again, maybe closer to like a floor or like hitting the projected points total for CeeDee Lamb. And I think I could see even bigger days ahead, just given where Dak is as a quarterback. He's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the game. And also given that, he's not the only guy to gang up on. We've got George Pickens on the other side of the ball that defenses also have to focus in on.
Yeah, really, really happy for this guy. I know a lot of people had him marked as the top 3 wide receiver coming into the draft alongside Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And to have him go down, as you mentioned early on in that Bears game, was kind of frightening for a lot of fantasy owners. Thankfully, it was just a high ankle sprain. I know he was put, I think, on the IR, so that automatically means he's going to miss 4 weeks. To come back and still look this good, Schottenheimer is not going to rush him out too much. You don't want to overdo it, put a lot more stress on there. They do have a huge test this next week, man, versus Denver, who have, I would say, the best corner duo in the league, and Patrick Surtain, the reigning defensive player of the year, as well as Riley Moss. And Riley Moss, amongst people with, I think a certain target amount, about 50 targets, has the lowest completion percentage in the league as a CB2 at 39%. The guy is absolutely locked down elite. So him and George Pickens are going to have their hands full, and I'm really interested to see how he looks, kind of what they do, see if they can get him schemed up in different packages overall. But I love him going forward, man. You mentioned Dak Prescott. The guy is an absolute fantasy stud. He should be in MVP conversations. Kind of reminds me of what we saw with Joe Burrow last year, where he's just doing everything on offense that's absolutely possible. The running game is good. It's average to good, not anywhere elite. Offensive line isn't crazy, but the defense is nowhere to be found. And this guy's going to have to score 30 to 40 points every single week to give his team a chance. And that bodes well for CeeDee Lamb owners. So really, really happy for him. And I'm excited to get into the running backs next, my man.
Yeah, let's do it. So we've got a couple guys here to talk through for running backs. First guy, and it seems like this guy is a regular on our list, is Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. 16 carries for 94 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 38 yards, total of 34.2 PPR points. This is his second 3-touchdown game of the year. What a remarkable story for Jonathan Taylor. I don't think he went quite as early as his play this year has indicated in drafts. Many of us had him kind of mid-second round, maybe early third round if you grab Jamar Chase in the first round. So depending on how the draft fell, Jonathan Taylor, it seemed like, took a little bit of a hit just because of injury issues. I think maybe a little bit of inefficiency, maybe a bit uncertain nature of the Colts offense as well as age, right? He's getting a little bit older. We've talked about the shelf life of running backs is so limited. But this seems like this guy is just balling out every single game. He's no doubt a locked-in RB1. He's getting involvement in the receiving game as well. And even when he's not running for these prolific numbers, right? It seems like 80, 90 yards is a pretty routine game for Jonathan Taylor. He's still getting those high-value carries inside the red zone. Many of these teams these days, we've seen this with the Seahawks and Kenneth Walker giving carries to Zach Charbonnet at the goal line. But there's nothing like that in Indianapolis. It seems like this guy is the preferred workhorse back, one of the few workhorses I think left in the league, because many teams are moving to this running back by committee approach where you've got maybe a 1A and a 1B. But yeah, I think it's really encouraging to see him continue to get this heavy workload. I've mentioned it in past podcasts. I think this team really goes as far as Jonathan Taylor takes them. I know Michael Pittman has had a resurgence and Daniel Jones has been playing at a very high level, but Jonathan Taylor is still the centerpiece of this offense. And I don't think that changes, given even how well Daniel Jones and Michael Pittman have played so far.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, if I had a vote, he would be my MVP this year. I'm not going to lie to you. I know it's a QB award at this time, and it's devastating to me. I think the last guy to win it that was a non-QB was Adrian Peterson. So that was, 14, 15 years ago. But this guy is absolutely, man, you mentioned it and hit it right on the head. this team goes as far as they do. That was, dude, I'm just going to say that was an ass whooping they put on the Chargers this week. They were killing them, man. Like they were up, I think 37. It was what 37-20 was the final score, or some 37-24. But they were up by 4 or 5 scores at one point in that game where it wasn't even close, dude. The Colts defense is legit, but the offense is scary. You're putting up 37 points on a team that was known to have a top 8 defense in the league. We know how elite they've been defensively as far as on the line, getting into that pass rush. You know, we saw them play the Broncos early on in the season where the Chargers had a couple of picks, had 8 or 9 deflections at the line. Daniel Jones, I'm not going to say he's not good because he's been absolutely everything you've asked him this year. But if you were to say from a pure talent perspective, I don't think he's on a level of, say, like a Bo Nix by any means. But to do this, dude, to the Chargers is scary. This team is absolutely elite. I love what they have going for them. And next week, dude, you mentioned it, 34 points, has absolutely every reason to not hit that again. He already scored 32 points against Tennessee in their week 3 matchup where he went for, 17 carries, 102 yards, and again, a 3 touchdown game. So there's no reason that they can't match that against a Brian Callahan less Tennessee Titans, who have been, as we mentioned, probably the worst team in the league outside of the New York Jets. So I love it for him, dude, and I'm really excited to see what he does for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, I mean, great story for Jonathan Taylor. He's already dominated the Titans, right? Like he's done this once in Tennessee, and so I think the momentum is high going into that next matchup. But yeah, he's been playing at a very, very high level this season, and I hope it continues, right? That's a great story. Just the Colts as a team, just seeing how well they play together, seeing how they control the game and dominate. That's been one of the fun stories of the season. And speaking of one of the fun stories of the season, I know there was a lot of uncertainty about this guy coming into the NFL season because he came in with an injury. And it seemed like many of us were like, oh gosh, this happened again. We may have to trade him. We don't know what to do with him. And that's Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. 24 carries this week for 129 yards, 2 touchdowns, as well as 7 receptions on 8 targets for 72 yards, 39.1 PPR fantasy points. What a rock star. Like we thought about the beginning of the season, Christian McCaffrey comes in, he's limited in practice, alarm bells go off for all fantasy managers, myself included, because I drafted him in our league. And this is the first year I've had Christian McCaffrey, right? And I had no idea what to do because at that point, I think many people in our league, as well as many people in other leagues, they know the story with Christian McCaffrey, right? Charlie, you had him in one of our leagues, and I think you've kind of vowed silently to never draft Christian McCaffrey again, just given the injury risk and just the turbulence that comes with him because they work him so damn hard in that offense. But you know he's getting high value touches every week. And this isn't just in the running game. This is also in the receiving game. It was great to see him get some really punishing runs this weekend as well, where he's running through guys. He's running over guys. He's finishing runs. He is getting hit. He's taking those hits. He's bouncing off of defenders, but he's finishing those 10-yard runs. We knew that Christian McCaffrey has that game-breaking speed where he can get those 60, 70-yard chunk gains down the field. And we knew that he'd have receiving game involvement. But I think for me, the big thing that I'm seeing with Christian McCaffrey, he's finishing his runs. And the other big thing is he's getting that touchdown regression that we didn't see at the beginning of the season. He was getting at least 20 points per week, but not really scoring touchdowns. I think he had a couple through the air, but now it seems like he's regularly in the end zone. And I think that's a big, big boon for any of us as fantasy managers that have Christian McCaffrey, because it's exactly the guy that we drafted. It looks like he's in prime 2023 form. Seems like he's having quote unquote legacy games every week now, where he's in the end zone. He's scoring more than 30 points. He's really staking his claim, I think, to be the number 1 overall player in fantasy this season, especially given the amount of injuries we've seen and the amount of inconsistencies with many guys like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and others, even Saquon Barkley, let's throw him in that conversation, that were drafted in those first 4 or 5 picks.
I mean, yeah, he is special, dude. I did get burned by him last year. I think in our league that we had together, I had a top 3 pick, and I took him with my first overall pick, and I think he only ended up playing like 3 or 4 games, which was incredibly disappointing. That was kind of my reason to go scorched earth and vow to never have him on my team again. And maybe that was a little spiteful. I'm a man of accountability, and it probably was. But the guy's an absolute stud, dude. He tore up a Falcons defense that is elite in every category, pretty much. We know how good we were. We know how highly touted that matchup coming in. What I think I'm most impressed about is not necessarily the rushing, is more the reception aspect. And we know how good of a dual threat back he is. There's a reason he's been kind of compared to like the LTs and the Marshall Falks of the past, because he's not just a split between the gaps kind of guy. He can get out, he can throw him in the flat, he can actually run wide receiver-esque routes. And in the NFL right now, dude, he's eighth with 516 reception yards on the season. To be eighth in that category and to be so good is crazy to me, dude. So I'm really, really happy with how he is and what he's done. And just hopefully for them, they can stay healthy, especially with a team that's had a ton of injuries. It feels like every week they lose somebody that's incredibly special to their team. And especially on the offensive end, I mean, Purdy's still kind of coming back, working his way slowly from that turf toe injury. And Mac Jones is slinging what Mac Jones has been asked to do from a backup QB position. And got to hand it off, man. Maybe I bit off more than I can chew, burning him this season. But the next guy, I know I would never, ever write off, even if he did get hurt for me. That's Jahmyr Gibbs, my man.
And that's Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions, as you said, Charlie. 17 carries for 136 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 82 yards, total of 36.8 PPR points. I think at the beginning of the season, there was this big outcry as to what would this offense look like, especially from a rushing perspective, because John Morton, of course, steps in as the new offensive coordinator for Detroit, and Ben Johnson going to the Bears as the new head coach. We know how well that 2 running back system worked with Sonic and Knuckles, as they call them, with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs last season. Both alternating drives, both scoring touchdowns, both were incredibly efficient and spelled each other really well. So we know how well that system worked last season. But I think coming into this season, many of us are wondering, with this coordinator change, would Jahmyr Gibbs get more opportunities? Would he be that bell cow in this offense? And I think for a couple of these weeks, game against the Ravens, game against the Bengals, David Montgomery had his involvement, right? He was that solid RB2. He is a touchdown dependent guy, but he was having big performances. He was throwing touchdowns, running for touchdowns. He was getting in the end zone, and he was taking his claim to be one of the best RB2s in the game. But I think this is that game where maybe the tide shifts a little bit. This was a pretty kind of low-scoring game by our standards. Detroit Lions and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Thought I would expect a lot more fireworks, especially with the number of starters the Detroit Lions had out on the defensive side of the ball and how well Baker Mayfield has been playing. Obviously, the Bucs, of course, losing Mike Evans, Chris Godwin out, Emeka Egbuka with a hamstring injury. So they were playing a bit shorthanded as well. No Bucky Irving as well. But still, given how well Baker Mayfield has been playing, I expected a very high-scoring game. But to see that in a game where the Lions really kind of had to duke it out with a team, that Jahmyr Gibbs was one of the stars of the show, and that it really wasn't even close with Montgomery, right? 13 carries for Montgomery, 21 yards, 2 receptions on 3 targets for 18 yards, 5.9 PPR points. The discrepancy is massive, right? We've got almost a 30-point gap between these guys, and it feels like things are slowly moving in favor of Gibbs, right? Many of us drafted him early in the first round, probably no later than the 4th or 5th pick. I don't think I really saw him slide that much further, but this is the kind of game we wanted to see out of Jahmyr Gibbs, right? We wanted to have him stake his claim to be the workhorse in this offense, be a top 5 weekly option at the running back position. We already kind of knew that with him. The talent is there, but now it seems like the opportunities are coming as well, and they could continue. Given what we're seeing with David Montgomery, he might be regressing a little bit.
I mean, yeah, it sucks as a David Montgomery fantasy guy, and I know you've been trying to pawn David off to me here recently, which doesn't bode well, and we talked about it as well, man. It sucks for him and owners of him. However, dude, you got to be happy for Jahmyr Gibbs. There's a reason they went and drafted him in the first round, and a lot of people were like, what the heck? Nobody drafts running backs in the first round anymore. That's an anomaly. Usually they're day 2 guys, even mid to later rounds, like we've seen in the past from guys like Aaron Jones. But he had a monstrous game, dude. I mean, Jared Goff, I think, had an interception, was getting rushed in the pocket a lot. We know how good Todd Bowles' defenses usually are getting after the passer. So it was on Jahmyr Gibbs. Amon-Ra St. Brown did have that first touchdown, and then kind of after that wasn't really, really effective. We've yet to see Sam Laporta get back to his usual self. Jameson Williams is good for those 3 to 5 receptions that are usually just deep yard targets. But Jahmyr Gibbs is the real deal, man. He's still in that upper echelon, those top 3 or 4 running backs. I think right now, Sleeper has him as the number 4. running back in the entire league at full PPR. He's a dual threat in aspects. I mean, to have 3 receptions and 3 targets for 82 yards, I'm not going to say he's in Christian McCaffrey level at that, on that tier yet, but he is still relatively young. I mean, so there is a lot of opportunity for him. And within this Detroit Lions offense, anything is possible. They do have a bye this week, and then coming out, they play Minnesota. So that'll be a good test against another tough defense in Brian Flores. And I'm really excited, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do something that we don't normally do here, which is we're going to take a quick break. We've got a couple more guys that we want to talk about on the winners list. We're going to go a little bit faster through those guys. We've got some QBs and some tight ends coming up. So we'll take a short break. We'll come back, finish up winners, finish up the losers as well, and then we'll go to our next normal section, which is buy and sell. So we'll see you all in a bit, and we'll be back soon. All right, awesome, guys. So we're back. We're going to finish the remainders of winners and then go into our losers before we take our next break. So next section for us in winners is quarterbacks. And first guy is the hometown hero, Bo Nix. What a game. We mentioned this a little bit earlier with the Giants defense, but this was actually an incredible game from the Broncos' perspective. 30 unanswered points in the fourth quarter after the offense looked absolutely anemic for points in that game. Many of us questioned Sean Payton's play calling. There were lots of, sleeper chats going off saying, all Sean Payton calls is like check down routes to the running back, really not trying to push the ball down the field in a game that the Broncos should have had from the outset, right? Like, this is a good Giants team. This is not a Giants team that was expected to come into Mile High and knock off the Broncos, especially given how the Broncos have been playing. They've been favored in many of these games. And so, took a very heroic effort, I would say, for Bo Nix. So let's talk through his stats. 27 completions, 50 attempts, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then 5 carries for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns, and had 39.96 PPR points. As we mentioned, unbelievable comeback. Gets it going with a deflected ball to Troy Franklin, his guy from Oregon, in the back of the end zone, has those 2 rushing touchdowns towards the end of the game. And I think, Charlie, we've had this sort of, let's say, doubt about the Broncos' ability to close some of these close games. It seems like they're playing a lot of close games, had some ones not go their way against the Colts and the Chargers early on in the season. But I think this was a statement win for this team. I know this is a game they should have had, but this is a game where if they did not win this game, I could have seen the season going in the wrong direction, right? The amount of energy that this team would have lost, especially losing to a team like the Giants, not a very good football team, at home, after going to London, getting through all of that emotion of being in a new country, beating the Jets, I think that would have been very, very bad for the season. Luckily, these guys got it back on track. And, one thing, and this might be my Chris Collinsworth moment, as if you will, on this podcast, right? Much like the early years of Mahomes, man, it kind of reminded me a little bit of those early years of Mahomes. The Chiefs defense wasn't great. They were playing a lot of these close games. I remembered watching Mahomes on the sideline, just like kind of praying that his team could get a stop. And I don't know, I feel like Bo Nix is experiencing that right now. He's experiencing this growth of this team. They've got a good defense. They play a lot of close games, but he's having to dig them out of trouble quite a bit. And the talent is there. We're seeing that. And I think this is his moment to show us that he is the franchise quarterback the Broncos drafted. I think he's got weekly QB1 upside, very, very clutch moments towards the end of the game. Let's get your thoughts.
I mean, yeah, he was absolutely elite as far as escaping the pocket, stepped up when he needed to. I know that's kind of been an issue in the past. I think a lot of people think he hangs around a little too often and isn't willing just to kind of get those runs in. We saw him make that elite throw to Sutton down at the end of the game when I think they had 33 seconds left on the clock when they got the ball back from the Giants, who somehow missed a point after touchdown, which I think was their second or third on the day. Just absolutely embarrassing. Everybody's got to be happy. You mentioned there's kind of been a lot of indifferences with how Sean Payton has approached and called the games, especially in contrast to last season when it felt like they were letting him air it out more. I attribute this more to a sophomore slump with Bo Nix than anything. Defenses have more film. There's a lot more expectations coming into the season. Nobody would have said, hey, this team's going to go make the playoffs and play the Buffalo Bills in the wild card game. Nobody would have said that coming into his rookie year, especially after the last few seasons with Russell Wilson. We all know how that ended and the vitriol that this fan base and city has towards him as a QB. But, I mean, man, you mentioned it. This is a statement game, not only for him, but the team as a whole. Kansas City is on the uptrend. Chargers look like they've kind of faded back in, losing 3 of their last 4. Now the Chiefs sit tied with the Chargers at 4-3, second in the division. And this was a game that they must have. You're down 19-0 in the fourth quarter to go and score those 30 unanswered. They take the lead 30-26. Before then, the Giants score again. Mentioned with 33 seconds, they go march down the field. He gets them in position to win the game with 2 or 3 plays. That's huge, man. This bodes well for their confidence. Now they're sitting atop the division, 5-2, and they have a huge game coming up. I think next week, what is it, versus the Cowboys, as we talked about earlier. So a defense that is very, very iffy, very, very shaky, and I like the chances. And this is one of those, you cannot have a letdown game, man. You cannot have a letdown game. This is huge for them, and this is what separates the good from the great teams, and we'll see it here from the Cowboys, or see it here from the Broncos. And, you know, the next guy we just talked about earlier can't have a letdown game, and he proved it this weekend.
Absolutely. And that's Drake May of the New England Patriots. 21 completions on 23 attempts, 222 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then 8 rushes for 62 yards, had 23.08 PPR points. You know, it doesn't look like crazy stats, especially given we just talked about a 40-point guy, but this guy has had ungodly passing numbers this season. He has had an incredible passer rating. I think he's led the league at times and might still lead the league in passer rating. He actually set a new franchise completion percentage record for a New England Patriots quarterback. And let's think about that, right? This is a team that had Tom Brady, one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best, of this past, generation of the Super Bowl era. That's 91.3% this past week. And he broke the previous mark held by Tom Brady at 88.5%. So this is a resurgence that we're seeing with the New England Patriots, believe it or not, right? Who would have thought we would say that, given how dominant they were? But this is a resurgence led by a quarterback who clearly understands his skill set, understands how to utilize the talent around him. This is not a team, Charlie, that has a plethora of name branded talent, right? The top option in this offense at times varies between Stephon Diggs, who's kind of on the decline in his career, and then Keyshawn Boutte, who's a young player, right? Still an emerging guy, more of that deep threat down the field. Demario Douglas to a lesser extent, but I would put Boutte and Diggs as the top options. Hunter Henry will throw him in there on occasion, but not really name brand, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson kind of talent when it comes to the pass catcher room. And Drake May just gets the job done, man. This is a tough game. It's an emotional game because Mike Vrabel, head coach of the New England Patriots, is coaching in his former digs in Tennessee. You don't want to leave Tennessee with a loss, right? You want to win for your coach. And Drake May, absolutely insane. He just continues to do what's needed to get this team to victory. And that's a big reason why they're in first place.
I'm incredibly impressed with them, man. We mentioned they had that huge win versus Buffalo a few weeks back, and to go out on top like that, and then you're coming in, you're riding high. A very, very young team. We know how good the defense can be. We know that's Mike Vrabel's special. They've always been that way. But to be able to do this, dude, to come out and show out, especially against a bad team, the Titans suck, dude. I'm just gonna say it plainly. They're one of the worst teams in the league. There's a reason they're 1-6. There's a reason they fired Brian Callahan after being 3-19. But to show up and be elite, you hang 31 on this team. You mentioned not having household names. Stephon Diggs is the guy. The running back room has been a revolving door entire season. Antonio Gibson hasn't been great. Ramondre Stevenson, we know the fumble issues he had. Travion Henderson, they drafted him for a good reason, but he hasn't actually shown that he's either gained the trust of the coaching staff or just hasn't broken through. Maybe he's not reading the playbook. That's a whole different story that I don't have any insight on unless you're actually in the film room. But this guy, dude, leading the NFL in completion percentage as a whole. I know you mentioned he had that 91% completion percentage this past weekend, but he's at 75% right now. We know how accurate Jared Goff is, who's at 74%, but to be a guy, essentially, I'm going to say it, he's in his first real season. He started 10 games last year, but it was under a bad coaching staff. There's a reason they got rid of Gerard Mayo. Comes in, shows he's been elite. Dude, he's 1,700 yards in the season, 12 touchdowns to go along with 2 interceptions. That shows that he's got a lot of caliber in the making. And moving forward, dude, he's only going to go up from here. And I think the next guy as well is only going to go up from here. And on the other side of the rivalry from Boston to New York, this guy's going to be a stud.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's Jackson Dart of the New York Giants. had 15 completions on 33 attempts for 283 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then also had 5 rush attempts for 11 yards and that critical touchdown that put them ahead 32 to 30, right? Critical error on the extra point late in that game, had 28.42 PPR points. So why are we mentioning Jackson Dart when his passing numbers in terms of completions and attempts weren't that great? Well, I think a big lineup call that people had to make this week was who to start at quarterback, right? Some guys got hurt or maybe they weren't performing as well. I know I was in that situation with Jordan Love. I felt kind of on the fence about him. And I saw that Jackson Dart had this matchup against a pretty good Broncos defense. I know they've been a little bit more generous than usual or that we expected them to be, but they're still a elite defense, right? They fly around, they get after the passer. But many of us, I don't think we're willing to start Jackson Dart. And I saw this in many sleeper chats, many fantasy chats. But all this guy went out and did was ball. And I know he had a, kind of a lucky deflection touchdown pass to Theo Johnson, but he was finding Cam Scatterbo early in that game. He was running for that touchdown late in the game, and he was still functional as a QB1. He was using those legs when he needed to, and he took care of the ball for the most part, right? I think he had an interception in this game, so that reduced his stats a little bit. Actually, a key interception to Justin Sternad, right, on a pretty critical play late in that game. But I think, Charlie, this guy has safely shown us that he's a QB1 no matter the matchup. And again, like Drake May, he's not really playing with a name-branded supporting cast. Malik Neighbors is out for the season. Cam Scatterbo, we've talked about him. He's a stud. He's definitely top shelf. But guys like Theo Johnson, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, right? These are not guys that you would say are elite talents. And Jackson Dart continues to get the best out of this offense. I'm excited for when Malik Neighbors comes back, man. That's going to be a great season next season. But just can't wait to see what this guy does the rest of the season. I think they're going to have some exciting games, and they could have one as early as next week against the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that they unexpectedly beat.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited for him, man. I mean, shout out to all the Giants fans who've endured some really, really bad years, even dating back to Eli's last season with the squad. There's been a lot of downtrodden times, and for them to stick it out and find this guy, it's just got to be like huge for the fan base, especially promising moving forward. You mentioned Cam Scatterbo and him getting Malik Neighbors last year. That's a three-headed monster, man. We know Neighbors is going to come back from an ACL injury, which may take some time. The only benefit of him getting injured with that specific type of injury is that it was early on in the season. He's going to have the whole rest of the season to rehab. You hope that he's out of the boot. You hope that he can maybe get some training in, and then he's ready to go week one by next season. And we've seen that, especially in the modern era of sports science, that it is possible for guys like that to come back, especially when they have the training staffs that they do now, the insight, the technology. Jackson Dart, dude, this guy's special. This guy's special. You see a lot of guys, you're up big in that game, and then you go down 4 points. What do? They're going to go out. You did mention a critical turnover late in that game, but to bring them back and even give them an opportunity to win the ball game shows the adversity and the mental strength that a lot of QBs don't have, and that you can't necessarily teach to a guy. Those are intangibles, man, that don't grow everywhere. This shows that he's been through the ringer. We heard a lot of the Broncos defenders talking about his chains before the game and kind of his swagger, kind of trying to get into his head. And the guy was absolutely elite. If there's not a monumental collapse on the defensive side of ball for the Giants, they come out with easily what I would consider the best win of the weekend, and a not so easy place to play versus a top 5 defense in the league, man. And I'm really, really happy for him. And I think moving forward, dude, he's only going to get better with more reps and more coaching under Brian Daboll if he somehow doesn't lose his job after this season.
Yeah, no, I think the exciting times ahead for Jackson Dart. This is not a good football team, so they could get a top pick in the next draft as well, so they could get even better. Malik Neighbors will be back next season, and so, yeah, just exciting things ahead for this franchise. They've been through a lot of quarterbacks coming through since Eli Manning, and so hopefully they can keep it going. Hopefully they've got their guy with Jackson Dart. I think we've got our guy as fantasy managers. If we picked him up on waivers this past week, I think he's going to ball the remainder of the season. And speaking of guys that continue to ball, let's talk about the old guy, the elder statesman in this QB room, which is Joe Flacco of the Cincinnati Bengals. 31 completions on 47 attempts for 342 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 5 rushing attempts for 3 yards. Had a key scramble late in that game on a keeper as well, believe it or not. Had a read option that he took himself and got a key first down. Had 25.98 PPR points. We've talked about Jamar Chase early in this podcast. T. Higgins also had a pretty good game, scored a touchdown. He was finding Andre Yosevas down the field in that beautiful deep ball, one-on-one coverage. And this is what the Bengals needed. It looks like Joe Flacco has again found the fountain of youth, throwing to these studs on the outside in a high volume passing offense where he can push the ball down the field. We know his arm talent certainly hasn't reduced, and we continue to see that in this game against a, let's say, pretty tough Steelers defense. Again, I know they've been generous. This is a divisional matchup, so obviously the Bengals know them better than most teams. But this is still a tough team, right? You've got Darius Slay on one side, Jalen Ramsey on another side. And so this is not an easy team to play against. You've got TJ Watt up front, and Aaron Rodgers is balling on the other side of the field, putting up points. But Joe Flacco, all he did is walk in on a Thursday night and put up elite QB1 numbers. And I think this is going to continue because the Bengals, I don't think, are going to sway from being a high volume passing offense going the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Chase Brown has kind of been inconsistent. We talked about it with the running room, similar to what we've seen out of the Cowboys this year, and I really like it. There's a reason they traded for this guy. They still have belief in this team. The offense is incredibly high powered. They have what is probably at worst number 3 or 4 in the NFL as far as wide receiver combos. They have a bona fide wide receiver 1. They'll be wide receiver 1 on almost any team in the last 20 years, save maybe the ones with Detroit Lions and Megatron. So Joe Flacco's a gunslinger, dude. We've seen what he can do. He won a Super Bowl with the Ravens for a reason. He won Super Bowl MVP with the Ravens for a reason. Come out, he's not going to be a mobile QB. You did mention the key scramble for them. But I really, really like this team moving forward, at least as far as from a fantasy perspective, because they're going to try and score as many points as possible. They're going to air it out. Dude, the guy is 40 years old, and he's still throwing 47 attempts. That's insanity to me. He's the second oldest QB in the league behind Aaron Rodgers. So this shows that they have a lot of trust in him. I think he came in on, a Tuesday or Wednesday. Maybe he had 2 days to learn. I think a Tuesday, had a full 1 day to learn the playbook. Probably got sent in an email before then. And then he comes in and balls out like this, dude. Incredibly, admirable from his perspective. And to transition to the next guy, he's not so old. He's actually a young rookie, man. That's the tight end, and I'm going to let you take it from there, brother.
Yeah, so that's Oronde Gadsden of the Los Angeles Chargers. Had 7 receptions on 9 targets for 164 yards and a touchdown. Had 30.4 PPR points. And, a couple of the notes here. Most receiving yards by a rookie tight end until this point in the 2025 NFL season. And the most receiving yards by a Chargers tight end since Antonio Gates. Think about that. Antonio Gates was the, I think, hallmark of dependability when it comes to Chargers tight ends, set a very, very high bar, was a very reliable option for guys like Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers in those days. And to have a guy now on that level of an Antonio Gates in terms of just the stats, right? Like he's not Antonio Gates right now, but just in terms of stats, we're making a stat comparison to Antonio Gates. I think that's pretty remarkable. And especially given how many mouths we have to feed in this offense, we've got Ladd McConkey, we've got Keenan Allen, we've got Quentin Johnston, we've got Marion Hampton when he comes back, we've got Kimani Vidal, right? We've got so many guys that we've got to feed. Hassan Haskins as well. And so to have a tight end step up and have 7 receptions, and this is the second straight week where he has had 7 receptions, had 7 catches on 8 targets for 68 yards at Miami the previous week. And so I think the big question we always ask in fantasy is this going to continue? Is this sustainable, right? Is this a guy that we can depend on? I think early signs here is that Oronde Gadsden can be a solid fringe TE1 week after week. Could be a great pickup in 2 flex leagues as well, especially if your league is running thin on wide receivers. This is a guy who's essentially playing like a wide receiver. He's playing that outside spot. He's getting those chunk gains. Had a pretty big chunk gain, I think 50 plus yards in this game. And Justin Herbert is slinging it like no one else. And so I think this could continue for this guy. He's going to be a great waiver pickup. I know waivers have probably passed for this week, but if you get a chance, if there's still waivers going on, this is a guy you got to pick up.
I mean, you hit it all on the head, man. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet here, but to be able to put up these big fantasy numbers in a loaded offense that has an elite wide receiving room from Quentin Johnston, that was a top 5 receiver before he got hurt. Ladd McConkey was a top 10 wide receiver last year in his rookie season. We know what Keenan Allen has done in the past. He's been as high as top 3 in certain years. To put up something comparable to Antonio Gates, one of the best tight ends, not only for the Chargers, but all time. If you've been watching in the NFL for the last 20 years, you know how elite that guy was. So I'm really, really happy for him. there is kind of the concern of boomer bust moving forward, how many targets he's going to get back, especially with Quentin Johnson having a second week back from injury. But overall, they have to throw it to a big body, and he doesn't really have any competition in that offense. So I really, really like it, man, and hoping for the best. And the next guy doesn't have really any competition in the entire offense, sans tight end room, receiving room as well, and running back.
Yeah, he's a lone wolf, isn't he? Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. 10 receptions on 13 targets, 74 yards, 2 touchdowns, and had 29.4 PPR points. I think the big note here, 13 targets, right? That is equivalent to a WR1 workload for any WR1, right? Like if we are seeing 13 or we're seeing even 10 plus targets, I think that guy is a WR1 in the league. And this is a guy that, he's a tight end, right? So he's a pass catching guy, helps out a little bit with blocking. Many of us drafted him earlier on in drafts, maybe like, second in some cases, maybe third round, depending on how the draft fell. I think given where the state of the tight end position is now, we can value this guy a lot more like a WR1 because he's probably the best at his position. We've got guys like Kittle, Laporta, Hawkinson, Kelsey. They've all had some inconsistencies at some point in the season, right? Nothing has really, stuck out about those guys to me. Many of them are regressing in terms of age, in terms of just involvement in the offense. And so Trey McBride, easily the TE1, I think, this season so far. We've had some other guys kind of emerge that we've talked about in prior weeks, but this is what we want to see from Trey McBride. He's the clear go-to guy in this offense. Given that Kyler is now out and not running, right, not using his legs, Jacoby Brissett, more of that pocket passer, I think we can expect this involvement for McBride moving forward, especially given the inconsistencies we're seeing with the wide receiving room. Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson, some of those guys. James Conner, of course, also being out as that bell cow in that offense. I think this is going to be the go-to guy, and that's not going to change anytime soon. Great days ahead for Trey McBride, and good to see him on the up.
Yeah, love him in that offense. I mean, you touched on it. Doesn't really have any threats there. The other tight ends that were notable and that were drafted a lot higher than him haven't really shown that consistency, or they haven't stayed healthy overall. It's currently ranked as number 2 in full PPR leagues. That's behind Jake Ferguson. And I think that's more due to the aspect of having a better thrower and better schemer. As far as the Cowboys, we know what Dak likes to do. He can sling it like crazy. But this guy is elite, man. I really like what he has to do with Jacoby Brissett. Having a backup QB is never easy. The running back room has had a ton of injuries. Marvin Harrison Jr. was supposed to be the guy. However, he hasn't been. He hasn't really shown up yet. So Trey McBride's offense, he was getting doubled like crazy versus the Packers. And then in the fourth quarter, when he had kind of a showing out party and that game was going back and forth down to the wire, nobody was covering. He's getting open in the flat. I think he had a touchdown along the right side. And forget his name, the color commentator. He used to play for the Saints, but he was talking about him. Just how does he get this open? So this shows the dangerous aspect of that offense, what they can do overall. And I really, really like McBride moving forward. And I think he's an effective target, not only just a week to week, but a whole season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think good days ahead for him. He's going to continue to lead the tight end position, and I don't think I see that changing. And just to round it out here, Charlie, we've got one more tight end before we go to our losers section. We've got Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers, had 5 receptions on 6 targets for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns, 28.1 PPR points. I think he came out of nowhere, Charlie. We've got a team that's got Jonnu Smith as well. We know how good Jonnu was for the Miami Dolphins last season. They pick him up. We knew Pat Freiermuth was a pretty good tight end, but maybe more of a TE2 than a TE1, just given that he was in single digits quite a bit last season with fantasy points, didn't have that regular involvement, wasn't a very pass-centric offense either. But yeah, he's coming out of nowhere. He's ripping it down the sideline on a long 68-yard touchdown, 19-yarder as well to cap off what I would consider a great night for a tight end. Anytime you're getting a guy that's scoring even more than 10 points, but no less, now this guy's over 20 points, almost 30 points, that's a gift for you as a fantasy manager, right? Makes up for maybe a guy that had a lackluster performance in other areas. I think the big question for me is this going to continue, right? We mentioned Jonnu Smith is in this offense. Pat Freiermuth can be that great, big body safety blanket for Aaron Rodgers over the middle of the field. But you've got a guy like a Jonnu Smith. You've got a guy like DK Metcalf that didn't really play great in this game. And so I could see those guys rebounding, right? So that's the kind of issue here that makes him a bit more of a risky fringe TE1, maybe just a risky week-to-week play. But, good to see this guy involved in this offense. And I think if we see plus matchups, and especially if Jonnu Smith goes down, we know who we're going to start in Pittsburgh.
I mean, yeah, he is absolutely. I think he was number 5 last year in fantasy for tight end, and this week, coming into this week, he was number 29. So as you mentioned, he wasn't the trusted target. It was more the tight end too on his own team. They brought in Jonnu Smith for a reason. In that Jalen Ramsey trade, he was kind of a throw-in, but we know how big of a body and for sure safety target he was with Tua Tagovailoa. And then they also have Darnell Washington, who scored a touchdown. So this team has a bevy of tight ends that maybe not a lot of people are familiar with or a lot of trust, but to have 5 receptions and 6 targets, 111 yards, he's incredibly mobile. He's very shifty for a tight end. A lot of times you see a guy grabs it, he maybe gets 1 to 2 yards after the catch, immediately taken down. This guy can shake off tacklers. Seen that in an offense that's going to be focusing mostly on getting the ball to DK Metcalf and guys like Austin. I really, really like him. I do have some worries about it moving forward. However, they play Green Bay this week, and we just talked about Trey McBride having a huge, huge game versus Green Bay this last weekend. So if you have the opportunity, maybe take that bet and give him a start, because Green Bay has been susceptible to tight ends, not only this last week, but all season long. So Freiermuth could be a good option if you have him stashed on your bench somewhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. So that's going to wrap up our winners section, Charlie. We're now going to go to our losers section. Do you want to get us started with the running backs?
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to lead it off with Kyren Williams for the Los Angeles Rams. We talked about how big of a week Devontae Adams did offensively with those 3 touchdowns. Kyren Williams, man, not a super strong week. We know how good Jacksonville's defense has been at necessarily turning offenses over. However, dude, 12 carries for 54 yards, 2 receptions for 3 targets for 11 yards, only finished with 8.5 fantasy points. An incredibly disappointing week for a guy that doesn't really have any threats in that offense. I know as far as from the running back room, we know what Blake Corum has done. However, Blake Corum has been receiving kicks from last year and even at times this year. So I really, really want to see more out of Kyren Williams. I know Sean McVay has had issues with the past where if a running back fumbles the ball, as we saw with Todd Gurley, that he will go away from him. And I think that's a slight to Kyren Williams because we know how good he is. He's not only just a pure gap runner, man. This guy can get out in space. He's incredibly quick. He can shed tacklers. And I think moving forward, I really, really like him. However, this week, definitely one of our losers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big note here, Charlie, you mentioned Blake Corum. I was watching this game early on Sunday, and I was seeing Blake Corum in on the goal line quite a bit more. And so this is kind of worrying me a bit as well. I don't have Kyren. I have Kyren Williams actually in one league, and it's PPR league. And I drafted Kyren Williams for his upside. I think he's one of the best and safest RB1 options given his age, given the dependability of that offense, given that Sean McVay loves the hell out of him. He also signed a contract extension, right? They brought this guy back. They wanted him to be a key piece of the offense. They've invested money in him. And to have Blake Corum now come in and take some of those goal line reps, it kind of reminds me of the situations we're seeing a bit with the Lions and also now with the Seahawks with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Zach Charbonnet, more of that preferred goal line runner. Kenneth Walker, more of those, kind of the rest of the field, right? He's covering the rest of the field. And so, a bit of a concern for me. Sean McVay had talked about the workload being 60-40 in terms of Kyren. So Blake Corum is still, I think, expected to see the field maybe more than we expect. And I think the key thing here, if you have Kyren Williams, strongly would recommend picking up Blake Corum, not just for injury concerns, but maybe also because Blake Corum might become that preferred red zone option. And so that way, if you're in a situation, maybe if you have to play both backs or if you have like a 2-flex league, that could still be a good play for you.
Yeah, it's disappointing as a whole, especially for somebody who traded for Kyren Williams in one of my dynasty leagues because I was just super high. And I think I actually sent you that trade. And I don't regret pulling it off when I did because I think it's a move for a team that can go all in. And I think this next guy, too, I think a lot of people had super high hopes for. And I actually just traded for him a couple weeks ago. And I talked about it, I think, on our last podcast about how I got burned. And that's Saquon Barkley, man. This guy was the number 1 running back in fantasy football last year. Everybody knew what he did. He was the key to that engine. He made the whole team run and go forward to that Super Bowl run. He didn't have the greatest game in the Super Bowl, but I think there was more due to Spagnuolo and the Chiefs defense just keying on him and making Jalen Hurts throw the ball, which they've shown they're very capable, especially this last weekend. But man, Saquon Barkley has been just, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say terrible this year, but very underwhelming, I think is the right word for it. And 18 carries for 44 yards this past weekend, one reception only on one target for -2 yards for 5.2 points, man. That is just awful. And we know they had some offensive line concerns coming into this season, getting a little bit older. Maybe there's defenses figuring it out. But overall, dude, it's incredibly disappointing. I think because it's not injury related. If there was injuries to be had, I could totally understand it. If he was above 30, I could totally understand it. We know he had the injury in the past when he was with the Giants, but he's been relatively healthy these last 3 seasons. And so to see this kind of, not just a fall off, man, this is a complete bottom out drop off from a running back perspective. I think he slipped down to 14th in full PPR leagues for overall running back. So to see a guy of his caliber and talent be legitimately average in terms of league rankings is disappointing. And it's getting to that point where I'm worried, Kaushik. I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, just send him over to my team, Charlie, while you're at it. I think I'll get out with Saquon Barkley on my roster. Charlie and I have been talking a Saquon Barkley trade for quite a bit for our viewers. But yeah, Charlie, just finishing up the notes on Saquon, 18 carries for 44 yards, clearly not an efficient game for him. Probably at that little bit more than 2 yards per carry mark. So not a great game. Saquon Barkley, one of the top 5 picks in this past fantasy draft, and very worthy of that recognition. I think one thing here, his season does seem to lighten up a bit towards the end of the season. And it seems like the Eagles may have found something with throwing the ball down the field. So maybe fewer loaded boxes, maybe less contact within the first 5 yards of a Saquon carry. I feel like he's been getting hit quite a bit within those first 3 to 5 yards of a carry and not really seeing as much daylight. And it's interesting here because, Christian McCaffrey, I think, was one of the other top backs taken. And Christian McCaffrey at the beginning of the season, I felt like he was also kind of grinding it out to get going. He's had a lot more passing game involvement, but I felt like Saquon was seeing the daylight. And now it feels like they've swapped roles, right? Christian McCaffrey's seeing the daylight, Saquon not so much, and doesn't get as much passing game involvement. Saquon said it after the game, we'll win games in whatever way we have to. If we have to throw it 50 times a game, we will. If we have to run it 50 times a game, we will. So I don't think he's worried about the game script, and I think he'll get his, but definitely worrying signs right now, given that many of us drafted him in the first round, and he's just not playing to his ADP.
And I think that's the thing is you did mention the schedule does lighten up for them. And hopefully, as we talked about earlier in the Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown area, that defenses will kind of back off the line. They're not going to bring those safety down so much, and that can open up for him. However, the offensive line still has to get pushed, and it seems like their most effective running play this year has been that tush push, which I know is probably going to get banned after this season. Shout out to my Packers for being the only team to actually vote to ban it this year. So every other 30 teams in the league, go cry about it. But the next guy, man, I really, really like as well. And I thought he's going to have a huge season. And I think up to this point he did. But as we talked about with the tight end part of our segment with Pat Freiermuth, he just had a loser week. And this doesn't mean go full-blown trade him or anything, but that's DK Metcalf for the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. They were clearly the focus this weekend. There's a reason Freiermuth had a touchdown or 2 touchdowns and 3 different tight ends scored a touchdown. The other 2 being John O. Smith and Darnell Washington. DK Metcalf had a quiet game for his standards, 3 receptions on 5 targets for 50 yards, 8 fantasy points. I don't think this is something that people need to be concerned going forward. I do think there's going to be a lot of focus on him. Secondary for the Packers is probably their weak point of that defense. I did mention that Trey McBride did just tear them up this past weekend, but Trey McBride is one of those tight ends that you can kind of put everywhere on the field. He's not a conventional tight end because of his ability to be good in space as well as having speed to run those good enough routes, similar to what we've seen out of Travis Kelce in the past. So DK Metcalf, man, sad for him this week, but he's just one of our losers. And ultimately, somebody's always going to end up here, Kaushik.
Yeah, absolutely, Charlie. I think, it's hard for these guys to have consistent weeks. That's why we always say in fantasy, start your studs, right? And those studs are usually guys that stay consistent. And there's very few of those guys that week over week are consistently putting up points. DK Metcalf, the talent is undeniable, right? This guy's a freak of nature. Aaron Rodgers and him clearly have that rapport where you can find him down the field. He can throw him the ball. He can find him on those back shoulders, find him on those deep balls down the field. And Aaron Rodgers has got that arm talent as well. So not a huge concern for me, Charlie, but I think given the matchup, right, given that they were going against the Bengals, one of the worst defenses in the NFL, pretty generous to wide receivers and playing a lot of high-scoring games, and especially the Steelers putting up points, I expected DK Metcalf to have better numbers. And so I think, if you're looking at trading him, right, as you mentioned, you don't want to trade DK Metcalf for a bag of Pringles potato chips, as they say, right? Like, this is not that kind of deal. You're still looking to get good value for DK Metcalf. But, I think his value maybe it dipped slightly, just given that this was an off performance. And we're reminded that we get a lot of volatility with this guy. I think he's still a WR2 with a pretty solid WR2 with WR1 upside weekly, just given the nature of the Steelers offense. But I think that does come with some volatility and some risk, maybe more than some of us are willing to tolerate.
No, definitely. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing is the volatility and risk that go along with that. And I think the next guy we're going to talk about doesn't necessarily have that volatility and risk. And he's one of your boys, one of those 5 boys that you were talking about, dude.
Yes, sir.
That's Rome Odunze. And I think he just had a really off week. I don't think he has any threats. I know DJ Moore is a wide receiver 1 in that offense in the past, but I think there's a reason they drafted Rome really high. There's a reason they believed in him all season. He just had a down week and an off week, and that's 2 receptions on 6 targets, man, for 31 yards, just for 5.1 fantasy points. As we mentioned, you said start your horses, start the for sure bona fide guys. They're not going to pop every single week. We know all about this. Bears did have a good win against the Saints, but I think they were trying to integrate that rushing attack a lot more. That's why they had that 2-headed spear with Swift and I'm going to butcher his name, Manungai.
You got it.
Manungai.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any concerns for them long term. I think the only concern I would say as far as the Bears offense as a whole that might involve Rome is that Caleb Williams has not been great at throwing the deep ball this year. He's been missing a lot of targets. He's erratic in that aspect. That's something he's had struggle with since last year. I do think he can get better at it, but they still have a lot of speed with Rome underneath. Ben Johnson is incredibly creative with his playbook. He likes to move wide receivers all over the field. So he's going to get targets, whether it's through screens, whether it's through slants, or those intermediate crossing routes. So I think continue to start this guy. Don't move off on him, and all will be well.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Charlie, right? DJ Moore has been the WR1 in this offense in years past. I think we saw passing of the baton, a clear one at that, to Rome Odunze this season. Was really the go-to guy for Caleb Williams. I don't think these past couple of games really changed much. I think the Bears have just probably made a bit more of a commitment to the running game, getting DeAndre Swift involved. He's had a couple of 100-yard rushing games, has scored a touchdown in both. And I think they've also been playing relatively tighter in terms of the score, right? Like, they haven't been playing these like massively high scoring games where they have to air the ball out a crazy amount. And even when they are, they're not really like pushing the ball too much down the field. I think they've got a couple big plays per game. And so, this is a product of figuring out this Ben Johnson system, figuring out how to push the ball down the field, and also Caleb Williams really embracing this new system. He's playing with a new offensive coordinator, new head coach. And so I think there's going to be some growing pains. But Rome Odunze, the talent is undeniable, just like DK Metcalf. I think this is a great buy low opportunity, honestly. I think we're going to talk about that in the future segments here. But yeah, not too concerned with him. I think he's just had a couple of bad weeks, and hopefully he gets back on track next week.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it long term. And this next guy, I'm not necessarily worried about either long term, and that's Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, had necessarily not his biggest game, just 4 receptions on 10 targets go along for 42 yards for 8.2 points. We know they're playing a 49ers team that's incredibly banged up, but we know how good of a defensive coordinator Robert Saleh is. There's a reason that the 49ers were a top 5 defense consistently for years underneath him before he went to take that head coaching job with the Jets, where I still think he was wrongfully fired after one season. Just kind of there was constant turmoil and everywhere. But this team with the Falcons, they are all about Bijan Robinson. So they'll go as far as Bijan Robinson go, similar to what we talked about with Jonathan Taylor, is when he goes, everyone else follows. And Bijan Robinson had an uncharacteristic, I can't even talk right now, man. A bad night. I'm fumbling over my words. I'm sorry. but just a poor night overall for his standards. And with that, Michael Penix was kind of having the defensive line and linebackers rush down on him. Drake London was covered up a lot, but I'm not incredibly worried. They play the Dolphins this next week, so I expect them and the offense as a whole to get back on track.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Drake London, he's on the losers list this week, but we know that the upside is there. I think he was a WR5 overall last season. Sees 10 targets in this game. I think a lot of us wished he would do more with those targets, and we were wishing that we wouldn't see this amount of volatility. He had a 30-point game last week, now has a single-digit game. And so I think the volatility is a bit concerning given that we know how talented this guy is. But I think it's also the reality of this Falcons offense, as you said, right? They're going to lean on Bijan Robinson. Game script might dictate that as well. But Bijan Robinson is also a great pass catching back. I think a lot of us forget that. He's a dual threat in the same way that Christian McCaffrey is. I think those are the only two guys, maybe Jahmyr Gibbs to a lesser extent, that are involved in both the passing game and the running game and can really be a game breaker. But yeah, like even in a passing situation, Bijan Robinson could get targeted. And I think that comes at Drake London's expense. Again, I don't think this is a worrying situation, but I think it's a realization that, again, Drake London, maybe he's more of that fringe WR1 than a true WR1, just given that we've got some of that week-to-week volatility with guys, and we see this with guys like A.J. Brown that we put in that conversation every week of that fringe top 10, top 12 wide receiver, but we know that he comes with that added risk, and I think that applies with Drake London. But again, you're not looking to trade Drake London for nothing at this point, right? You're looking to get a good return if you are looking to trade him. And so definitely keep that in mind. But I think better days are ahead for him and for this offense.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the Falcons long term. I think they're going to be okay, and I actually love the direction that they're moving forward a lot better than they have been these last couple of years. And I'm glad they're all in on Michael Penix. This next guy though, I'm not all in on. I'm out on him completely. I think he's had enough time to show that he got a max contract. He's not in his year 1 or year 2. I actually think he's in year 4 now. That's the former number 1 pick overall, and that's Kyler Murray for the Arizona Cardinals, man. He was benched in favor of Jacoby Brissett this last weekend. There's been a lot of trust issues with the locker room and coaching staff as a whole, dude. We know the talent he can bring offensively. He's an elite runner. He's truly one of those dual threat quarterbacks. However, the size has always been an issue for him necessarily. We've seen small QBs in the past be successful. Drew Brees is probably the greatest of all time to be under 6'2". The guy was an absolute rocket, got quick outs with it, could actually throw the ball deep down the field. We saw the connection he had with guys like Michael Thomas. Baker Mayfield has shown that he's elite, and he's not a huge QB as well. I just don't like his attitude overall. I don't like what he's shown. And honestly, from the sounds of it, this last broadcast too, just listening to them, sounds like Jacoby Brissett's the one putting in the time after practice with the reps overall. And it's Jonathan Vilma, so I apologize. I remember the name now. Jonathan Vilma was the one doing color commentating on Sunday for that game down in Arizona. And he even mentioned it. Jacoby Brissett will go to all the wide receivers and tight ends and say, hey, do you want to stay late after practice? Do you want to get these reps? Do you want to build these connections? The timing, that's a huge thing that I think a lot of people don't talk about, is the timing when he's taking that step out, when they're breaking in, when he hits that back foot, that's when he's triggering to throw and load up the ball. And when you have that connection, you're going to go a lot better. It's going to be a lot better. You're going to be more in sync. And overall, there's a lot more trust. And Kyler Murray, man, I know he didn't play this weekend, so we don't have any stats for him. But I don't think that he's a part of their future moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit it on the head, Charlie. I think this is an effort thing here with Kyler Murray, right? Like we've seen him in so many systems that catered to him using his legs. They had a number 1 wide receiver, a clear one in DeAndre Hopkins. They've had one in Marvin Harrison Jr. I know he hasn't really played to his kind of potential the past couple of seasons, but they've had the guys around him, right? Like this hasn't been the most talented team in the NFL, but it's certainly not the least talented team in the NFL, especially with a guy like James Conner, guy like Trey McBride that they add. And so I think no more excuses for Kyler Murray, as you said, right? He started the past few seasons really hot in the first few games, and I don't think he's playing at all close to the level that we wanted him to, given that he got such a big contract. And this is just a tough situation now for Arizona, right? You've got committed money now to Kyler Murray. Will they look to move him? Will anybody even want Kyler Murray? Like, is there going to be a QB needy team? I know the Dolphins are in a pretty bad situation. We're going to talk about them here in a little bit. But is anybody really willing to move for Kyler Murray? and really kind of revive his career? I know we've seen this with Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, but is Kyler Murray really the next guy to cross that chasm? Unclear, right? Really unclear. He's been really solid in the first couple of weeks of the season, it feels like, but I think many of us know what's to come with Kyler Murray, and that hasn't been there hasn't been any exception to that this season. Unfortunate for the Cardinals. Good to see Jacoby Brissett play well. We'll see if they continue to ride him moving forward. I don't think I see Kyler Murray coming back. But yeah, as I mentioned, just a tough situation for this team, and interested to see what will come next.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest takeaway I have from everything is that he wasn't able to make it work with Cliff Kingsbury, who may not be the greatest coach in the league, but he's an elite offensive mind. We know what he did in college when he was down at Texas Tech and stuff like that. And Kingsbury just took Jaden Daniels to the NFC Championship in his rookie season. So if you can't make it work with that guy and you have good skill position, then it's not going to work for Ball. And this next guy, man, I don't even think it's an attitude issue or an effort issue. I feel really, really bad for him. I think I shared that quote with you earlier about the owner, Woody Johnson, came out. The owner of the Jets just came out today and said that it's not an Aaron Glenn issue. It's not a coaching staff. It's that nobody would be able to make it work with Justin Fields, and that is Justin Fields. The New York Jets QB, man, had a rough week. We know last weekend versus the Broncos, I think he had 9 sacks, and I think it was negative yardage. Finished with like 2 points in fantasy, but this weekend didn't do a lot better. And that's 6 completions on 12 attempts for 46 yards to go along with 4 rushes for 22 yards, only 4.04 PPR fantasy points. Ended up being benched in favor of Tyrod Taylor. Hard to operate. Garrett Wilson, we know, has been hurt. He's going to be out long-term for them. They say they wanted to be more aggressive as a passer. However, that just did not follow through this week. Breece Hall kind of looks like he's fallen down the earth. Doesn't really have a lot of offensive options outside of that. We do know about Taylor, their stud tight end that they drafted in the first round drafted this year. And he's kind of been their starting tight end for them. But overall, man, I just don't have a lot of trust in Justin Fields. I think he's going to have a great career as far as getting money. He's going to have more opportunities. He just looks like a career backup to me at this point. And not to pour salt on his wound at all, but I did tell my chat earlier this season that Tyrod Taylor would be starting. That's actually in the summer, that Tyrod Taylor would be starting over Justin Fields, because I just have not seen enough from him from a QB pocket perspective or pocket presence standpoint that he's shown enough to be a starting QB in this league.
Yeah. I mean, this is an unfortunate situation. You know, I live in Chicago, as many of our listeners know, and you know, for the first couple of years I was here, Justin Fields was the quarterback. And I think there were some fireworks. You know, he was a top pick. He was an elite guy coming out of Ohio State. The arm talent was undeniable. I think he won a bowl game, or he was pretty close to winning the national championship, might have won the national championship out of college. He was a very, very talented guy. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. And, you know, to see that he started the season so well against a MVP or just a Hall of Fame caliber, let's call it, Pittsburgh Steelers defense with all those ball hawks on the side of the ball, and the pass rush with TJ Watt in a game that none of us had the Jets winning or even playing in a close fashion. And now to see where he's regressed, 4 points, right? Not seeing that rushing upside, not really pushing the ball down the field, not really even functioning well as a quarterback in this offense. Very worrying signs. I don't know where he goes from here. He's getting killed when he's running, right? Panthers DB came and just smacked him this week. I think he took a face shot there. Illegal. I think they called a penalty and there was a little bit of a scrum. But I think the point is, you know, teams no longer really fear Justin Fields, right? They know that he's a bit one-dimensional. He looks to run. He's maybe a first-read kind of guy. And especially when he doesn't have his go-to guy in Garrett Wilson, it's really hard for him to know what to do. I think the play calling, you know, there has to be some blame there. Tanner Engstrand, the New York Jets offensive coordinator, I don't think he's calling the most effective game script. There's been a lot of conservative play calling there, especially in the Bronco game. You know, that play calling before the half expired, I think that told us a lot about their confidence in Justin Fields and just the competency of the play calling overall. But this is just not a good situation. This guy is definitely not startable moving forward. And I think Tyrod Taylor continues to see the majority of the starts for this team.
Yeah, I think you'll actually see a lot of people dropping Justin Fields off their league. And like you mentioned, picking up Tyrod Taylor. Even if Justin Fields does take back the starting position, I just don't think there's a a lot of trust in him and the Jets offense as a whole. There's a reason they're the only winless team in the NFL, and it's probably going to stay that way for the remainder for quite some time because I don't think they have a lot of winnable games on their schedule. And the next guy we're going to talk about actually played the Jets this weekend, and that's Bryce Young, man, for the Carolina Panthers. Left the game with an injury, but he had 15 completions on 25 attempts to go along with 138 yards. Did have a passing touchdown, which is nice. 2 rushes for 10 yards, finished with just 10.52 fantasy points. I think we had a lot of high hopes coming into this season. There was a lot of talks how they were in sync. The offense was getting a lot stronger. We know what Chuba Hubbard has kind of done. There's a reason they gave him that contract. We've talked about Rico Dowdle, how much of a beast he's been these last few weeks. So kind of having a complementary offense. The defense is kind of trending up. It's not super elite, but it's definitely competent enough to keep them in ball games and give their offense an opportunity. They went out and made the big splash, getting what a lot of people consider to be the best wide receiver in the draft in Ted McMillan. It just kind of hasn't translated a lot. Looks like Tet falls off in the second half of games. Not super high on that. Don't really know what they see in Bryce moving forward. It sucks as somebody who has Bryce and did draft him in my Dynasty rookie draft 2 years ago. Was really, really high on him. I know he's on the smaller side, and we talked about it with Kyler Murray. However, Bryce Young has shown at times that he can be a slinger. He's shown that he's a tough, has a tough pocket presence, will stay in there. He's willing to get hit. I just don't think moving forward, they have a lot of trust in him. And there was actually word this weekend they were looking to shop and get a QB in the market. So we'll see if that stays true. But we hope he can get healthy. But right now, he might be somebody that you bench, stash away if you have a spot, if he goes on IR, or just completely drop from your lineup as a whole.
Yeah, I think the easy answer here, Charlie, there's a lot of options with Bryce Young, but I don't think this guy's startable moving forward. I think height is a big factor for him. He's one of the shorter quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think, for some of us, it may feel like a joke, right? Of like, oh, he's tiny, can't find anybody. But that is a problem, right? You're throwing over these really big defensive linemen, especially to big-bodied guys like Tet McMillan. You try to get the ball out. You're trying to, lead the guy and whatnot. But especially when you're a smaller guy, I think Drew Brees did this really well with the New Orleans Saints, figuring it out and that offense. But I still think with Dave Canales and the way this team is built, guy coming over from Tampa Bay a few years ago, I think this offense is built around the run. And I don't know if it's really built to exploit the talents of Bryce Young and the way he played at Alabama and the way that he was able to thrive at a very high level. And so I just think the easy answer is Bryce Young has got to be a guy on waivers. He's got to be a guy that you drop. I don't think he's a guy that you start moving forward. It's going to be interesting to see where they go from here with the Panthers. Now, Andy Dalton can step in as a capable backup, and Andy Dalton has functioned at a very high level. He can throw the ball down the field. He can throw the ball very accurately. He's been a guy that's been a bit of a journeyman in the NFL, but he's been a solid start whenever he's played. And so, especially given what we saw with Rico Dowdle eating into Chuba Hubbard's volume, if Andy Dalton has a few good games, we could see Bryce Young benched for the longer term, especially given the health concerns. So, I think the easy answer here, Bryce Young, not a startable QB moving forward, and it'll be interesting to see where Carolina goes from here.
Yeah, it sucks for me, man. I feel like I took a chance and I blew it. I don't know what else to say. I blew it. I could have had Bijan Robinson in that draft. I clearly was all messed up in the head, stressed out. But overall, I wish the Bryce the best. And like you said, definitely not a startable guy. And I don't think this next guy is a startable guy either. I have not ever been a fan of him entirely. He just had a press conference where I think he made some bad impressions, and I didn't like his emotions and energy towards his teammates. That's Tua Tagovailoa for the Miami Dolphins, man. Didn't have a greatest weekend. He had 12 completions on 23 attempts for 100 yards to go along with 3 rushes for 6 yards. Finished with negative 1.4 fantasy points. And I do know the weather was awful. They had, 30, 40 mile per hour winds in Cleveland. I know it was expected to be a low scoring game. There's been so much talk in the past about how Miami does outside of Miami, especially in inclement weather. We saw a couple years ago when they were playing the Chiefs and it was a brutally cold game and they were no-show offensively. So I get all that. But when you're benched in favor of Quinn Ewers, man, a guy that wasn't drafted incredibly high. He was drafted, I think, in the 5th round or later. This was his first real action this year. Barely seen the field as a pro, man. just not a good situation. Since the Tyreek injury with the dislocated knee, it's been, all going downhill. Last summer, they talked about, hey, we're having a reset. We're having an energy. We're in the locker room earlier. We're having players only meetings. We're being okay. Then what was it? Like week 2, they had another players only meeting. I think I said on this own podcast when they played the Patriots that if you want to watch a team that doesn't know how to play football right, you watch the Miami Dolphins. McDaniel's job he's gonna be out of a job. I think the guy's an elite offensive coordinator. I don't know if he's a head coach built for this league. Some guys are like that, some are not. We wish him the best. I actually hope, side note, that the Packers pick him up if he does, because I would love to see him kind of get our playbook going and see what he can cook up with Matt LaFleur. But Tua, man, he's very much just a field guy, dude. He makes very quick decisions, but the lack of rushing has been kind of embarrassing with him. He's unstartable since the 2023 season. It's bad situation as a whole. The Tyreek injury. Jalen Waddle feels like he should be way more involved in the system, but he's not because he's an elite wide receiver. The only guy that's actually effective week to week in that offense is Devon Achane. And I don't even think he's going to stay there long term because he's either going to ask out or they're going to end up trying to fetch him for some pieces to build around him moving forward. So I'm completely out on Tua, my man.
Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing before I get into Tua, I actually saw a rumor that the Seahawks were looking to deal for Devon Achane and were willing to actually throw in Tariq Woolen, their very talented cornerback, and maybe some other assets. So some moves could be around the corner here. Could be a fire sale impending here in Miami, but just not good signs for this team. I think this team has struggled since day one. Tyreek wasn't going to be the same. I think many of us knew that, but especially after his injury, Jalen Waddle had that one good game against Carolina, but I don't think he's been the most consistent guy either. And he hasn't really been thrust into that WR1 role because Tyreek has been around his whole career since Jalen Waddle arrived. And so I think it's been just a bad season, as we mentioned, for this team. They've underachieved their potential. Tua has talked a lot about leadership in his press conferences and his leadership with Tyreek and some of the comments that were tossed by Tyreek in the offseason. But I think now it's a reflection of Tua's leadership and just the trust of the locker room in a guy like Tua and in a guy like McDaniel. And I think that trust is clearly waning. They're not playing well as a team. They're not playing together. We've seen several just like very confusing decisions made by Tua, many in the Bills game that were pointed out on Instagram and kind of went viral, where he's just running backwards with no one rushing him, or he's missing guys wide open down the field, just blatantly missing them. And I think that's just, Tua in a nutshell, right? He's a field guy. He's going to look for that first, second read. He wants to make quick decisions with the ball, especially given the concussion history that he's had. I don't think he's looking to get hit. And so I think that makes him even more risk averse and puts this team in bad situations. And so, we'll see where they go from here. Quinn Ewers was playing in this game. I don't know if they will try out Quinn Ewers the rest of the season or where they go in terms of quarterback. But I think this is a season that's lost for Miami, and they've got a lot of rebuilding to do.
Yeah, I'm not high on them at all. I think, like you said, they should probably have a fire sale. If Achane can stay, that's amazing because to have a good running back like that already integrated in the system, knows the team culture, even keeping Jalen Waddle if that's possible would be huge for them. But they just don't have a lot of actual viable pieces that people would want to go out and want, especially with Tyreek's age, now his injury history. I don't think anybody's going to want Tua. He's making too much money. You mentioned the concussion issues and the lack of leadership. So this team completely sell on Tua, drop him if you have the opportunity. Obviously, if you're in Dynasty, stash him because he could be a guy that gets a, week to week start and has a decent game. But overall, I think moving forward, he's not reliable. And unfortunately, the next guy is my boy. And I think this is more a product due to the lack of efficient play calling than it is his play individually. That's Jordan Love for the Green Bay Packers, man. 19 completions on 29 attempts for 179 yards this week to go along with just one touchdown, 4 rushes for 22 yards. Didn't have a horrible week as far as compared to the guys that we've mentioned previous in this segment, but for a guy that I think a lot of people had as a top 8 fantasy QB coming into this season, just 13.36 PPR points, just not a good option week to week, man. The offense is going to run through Josh Jacobs. We knew Josh Jacobs was questionable coming into this matchup versus Arizona. Still had multiple touchdowns. He has 2 straight touchdowns in 3 straight weeks now. So he's clearly a guy. This team should have a higher volume passing as a whole. They have weapons, man. I don't think they have necessarily this elite, clear-cut wide receiver one, but they drafted Matthew Golden in the freaking first round. I'm so frustrated with him not being involved. The guy clearly has talent. He can make great reads. We saw it in the Cincinnati game as well. He comes across, we talked about it. He rolls out to his left, Love rolls out to his left. Where does he find him? He cuts across the back, the middle of the field, gets himself open. That's stuff you can't teach. That's just consistent reps and knowing the system as a whole. Tucker Kraft, one of the best tight ends in the league, in my opinion. I'm obviously biased being a Packers fan, but it is really, really frustrating and disappointing that this guy isn't getting 6 to 8 targets a week. He's a run after catch, just monster. He can do whatever he wants. You can put him anywhere in the field. And I just don't know what to do with them, dude. This team feels like it should be so much better. And this offense feels like it has the ability to be scoring 35, 40 points a game with the bevy of targets, with the actual dual threat ability. We've seen what they've done with Aaron Rodgers in the past. And no, I'm not comparing Jordan Love to Aaron Rodgers. I don't think that's fair to either of them. Jordan Love is just in his third year starting. Aaron Rodgers, yes, albeit he was at the end of his prime, but he was still winning MVPs. There's a reason he won back-to-back MVPs with LaFleur. It's just this team, man, has so much uncertainty, and this week is make or break. This Steelers defense is atrocious. We just talked about how much Joe Flacco shredded them up, went for 347. You know, they've scored over 30 points. We saw what Justin Fields did for them in week 1, where he ate them up. So if they don't hang up a 30-piece on the Steelers, I will still be calling for Matt LaFleur's play calling duties to be stripped and ripped from him like I have for the past 5 weeks. That's part of the reason why I want McDaniel there, because McDaniel is a great play caller who gets everybody involved. And I just think LaFleur gets a little too cute with it. And it finally took him till the end of the game to actually go for it on 4th down and have some freaking trust in Jordan Love, which I think all Packers fans have built at this point. And I digress.
Yeah. No, it's all good. It's fun hearing you talk Packers, man. I know you're passionate about that team, and you have been for a while. Yeah, I think the easy answer here is that he's just not a good QB option week to week, and that's Jordan Love. This offense is clearly running through Josh Jacobs. We've talked about that. I think regardless of how efficient Josh Jacobs is, he's going to continue to score the bulk of the touchdowns for this team. And the team clearly has trust in him. And he's a great back. He's going to be a top 3 running back, I think, by the end of the season when things are said and done. He's getting that much of a healthy workload. He's also getting involvement in the passing game. And I think this Packers team, they have a good enough defense that they don't need to be a high point per game team to win games and to close them out, especially after the addition of Micah Parsons. We know they've got some ball hawks on the defense side of the ball in the secondary as well, Xavier McKinney and others. And so, you know, it's a situation, I think, for Jordan Love where he's playing more of that game manager role. Just don't make the crucial mistake. Don't play hero ball. It's unfortunate because he's not pushing the ball down the field. We know this guy was a huge arm talent at Utah State, was pushing the ball down the field, had that big arm, that live arm. And I think they're just not utilizing him to his full potential in terms of the down the field passing. But, you know, I think this is a team that's just, you know, they're going to throw the ball if they need to, but they're really going to ride Josh Jacobs, and he's going to be their hammer as well as their guy to score those early touchdowns and pull away from teams. And that's just the reality of it. And that impacts, you know, Jordan Love. I think, you know, the interesting thing here is Jordan Love has been mentioned as a streamer. There's plenty of other better options. We've talked about some of those guys on this podcast, guys like Jackson Dart, Joe Flacco, also guys like Sam Darnold and Aaron Rodgers that are playing much better ball. They're good fill-ins as QB2s week to week. They also have elite wide receivers. I know Matthew Golden was drafted in the first round, but I think he's still coming on, right? He's not a clear WR1 at this point. He's maybe a bit more of a gadget guy, a kind of down the field burner, and that's how he's being used. I could certainly see him in that WR1 role, but just given, you know, guys like Sam Darnold with JSN, Aaron Rodgers with DK Metcalf, Joe Flacco with Jamar Chase, there's a lot better QB2 options. So I don't think you should be spending any time, fab, or anything like that on Jordan Love. You should stay on waivers. And with that, Charlie, we're actually going to finish out that segment. So quite a bit that we covered there. We're going to take a quick pause here to catch our breath, and then we're going to go to the next section, which is buys and sells. So we'll see you all soon.
And we're back. So we just finished up our biggest winners and losers of this past week. We know it was a little bit longer segment, but there was a lot to get into, lots of great games from a lot of different people in different areas. It was nice to talk about some tight ends. But right now we're going to do our buys and sells. I'm going to take over the buys, and Kaushik is going to take us off and lead with the sells after this. First buys is going to be from the wide receiver categories. I think this is the most notable category and skill position in fantasy football, and that's typical, and that's Rome Odunze. I know we talked about him as one of our losers from this last weekend. I'm going to touch up on his stats once again, and that was 2 receptions on 6 targets for 31 yards, along with 5.1 fantasy points. I think it was more just of an off week. We mentioned that they had a kind of forcefulness to get into the running attack and pound the rock, as they say, on the New Orleans Saints. And I think that was just kind of the overall focus and strength that they wanted to hit this week. So I'm not too worried about him. If you have the opportunity, somebody's low on him, somebody has some deeper positions at the wide receiver set, go out, trade for him. He's still the wide receiver 1 in that offense. We talked about what DJ Moore has done in the past. However, it looks like they've ceded those duties, moved over to Rome. Him and Caleb have an immediate connection. It's been strong since day one. Go out, get him. Definitely a guy you want to see moving forward, and a guy you would love to have in that wide receiver 2 or flex position spot if you have multiple availabilities and openings in that area of your team. Next guy that I really was hyped about, and I know I said really 4 times, but I'm incredibly happy for him because, like his counterpart, Ja'Marr Chase, finally got a QB that was actually relevant, could stay in the pocket and hit those throws for him. And that's T. Higgins, man, from the Cincinnati Bengals. Everybody's talked about him for a long time now. He's a solid wide receiver, too, one of the best in the league. I would consider him outside of along with Devontae Smith, with Jalen Waddles of the world before Tyreek's injury, with the Jordan Addison. This guy's a bona fide stud. This weekend had his best game of the year so far. He had 8 receptions on 10 targets for 96 yards to go along with 1 touchdown as well. Finished with 23.6 fantasy points. And what I liked about it most is on that last drive, caught a pass, was wide open, could have easily went in and scored for the touchdown. What does he do? Goes and takes the immediate slide, sets him up for a game-winning field goal. Just heady play by him. Love that awareness. That's not everywhere. A lot of guys want to go in, go get their stats. But this shows he's a team player. They needed this win. It was a crucial win for them to stay afloat in the AFC North, to give themselves a chance with Joe Burrow potentially coming back in the next month or so. Super happy for him. And I think the connection between Joe Flacco and him, as well as with Flacco and Chase, is only going to build for the remainder of the season. And when Joe Cool gets back, we know how good they already are. Next guy as well, we talked about a little bit too, and that's Drake London with the Atlanta Falcons, man. 4 receptions on 10 targets, along with 42 yards for 8.2 points. We talked about how Bijan Robinson is the engine that keeps this team going, and they're only going to go as far as he does. However, I think Drake is still the bona fide wide receiver 1 in that offense, even with Kyle Pitts kind of having that reemergence this year. It's best year since his rookie season. Drake London, overall, a guy I want to keep on your team. Don't go out, trade him if you can't. Don't go out and trade him off your team unless you're getting a haul, unless there's some dearth at some other positions. But if you have the availability, man, or if you have the ability, go out, get him, pick him up, maybe trade him for some flex guys, throw a little package together, have him as a throw-in. I know you've always been big on him, Kaushik, but Drake London is a man. Really like him, and I really like Atlanta's offense moving forward for the remainder of the season. And that Michael Penix connection is only going to get better week in, week out as they get more reps and more practices underneath their belt. Next wide receiver is a dog. He's a dog. He plays for my rival, but it's Justin Jefferson for the Minnesota Vikings. Talked about it, similar to with the Ja'Marr Chase situation. Hasn't had a lot of opportunity, not due to his own inability, more due to the fact that J.J. McCarthy's been in and out of the lineup. Carson Wentz is been serviceable at times, but he's a backup QB at this point in his career. It is what it is. Justin Jefferson kind of had a quiet game and has had a quiet year for his standards so far. Just 5 receptions on 10 targets, go along with 79 yards, 12.9 fantasy points. Jordan Addison was kind of the focal point on that offense in the receiving courts this last weekend. They haven't had a consistent running game all year. But this guy, man, if you have the ability to go out and get him, take him. I know I took him with my, I think I was a 4th pick in one of my fantasy redrafts. And I love him, dude. This guy has the ability to go out and get 25, 30 points every single week when given the opportunity. And I think the Vikings are going to continue to pour resources into him. Last time I checked, J.J. McCarthy was actually about to be back. I think he was practicing this entire week and got some limited practices last week. So it looks like he's coming back. Hopefully this ankle injury he heals up, gets a little bit better. And also on top of that, he's had more time to watch game film, get integrated into the playbook, and connect with Justin Jefferson in practices. Go out, find him. Don't let him go. This guy is a stud. There's a reason why he was drafted number 2 by a lot of people in fantasy this year. That's it for the wide receivers. Now we're going to transition into the running backs. And this is a guy that's actually, I think for the first time all year, is going to be talked about in a positive light. And that's Isaiah Pacheco for the Kansas City Chiefs. He had 15 carries for 57 yards, 1 touchdown, and also 1 reception on 2 targets for -3 yards. Didn't have the greatest game as far as stats go, but he was effective enough to man for 12.4 PPR fantasy points. Great RB2 option, great flex. I know we talked about getting him off your team early in the season. The rushing room was abysmal for them. Patrick Mahomes was leading the team in rushing yards, and I think he might still be. However, with Rashee Rice coming back from the suspension, Xavier Worthy, 3 or 4 weeks away from that injury, Travis Kelce no longer having to be the go-to guy every single down. This opens up opportunities for Isaiah Pacheco to kind of build some complementary football with the passing game, as well as the offensive line is getting healthier and they're getting more reps together. There was a lot of issues with losing the left and right tackle from this last season, moving into the season, a lot of uncertainty. They look like they're building on that. The playbook has kind of gotten on schedule with them. We know what Andy Reid can do. He's one of the greatest offensive minds the game has ever seen. Definitely go out Isaiah Pacheco. He should be cheap. A lot of people actually might not even have him rostered. He might be on your waiver wire. Go out, pick him up, stash him. Looks like a good opportunity moving forward as this team is humming now and looks to get back into the contention that everybody thought they would be in. Next guy is Zach Charbonnet, though, for the Seattle Seahawks. Again, we haven't talked about him in a lot of positive light, as Kenneth Walker, K9 as he goes by, has been the focal point on the rushing attack for them all year. For this weekend, it was his show, and his show alone as K9 struggled. Didn't really have an effective game. Zach Charbonnet finished up with 12 carries for 49 yards, as well as 2 touchdowns. Did have 2 receptions and 2 targets for 6 yards. So showing he can get involved in the passing game a little bit, a little more of a safety net. Don't think he's going to go out and catch balls in the flat like you see with Chris McCaffrey's, with the Bijans or the Jahmyr Gibbs. But if he can be a dump-off guy, a guy that they trust on passing down situations, this bodes well for him. We know that he's been more of a goal line back in the past. But I think with him overall, this shows that they have a 2-headed monster, maybe not as strong as other teams for sake, but your backup running back on a team that's been dominated by Jackson Smith-Njigba, as well as Sam Darnold, man. He had 19.5 PPR points. This bodes well for him moving forward, as well as the offense as a whole. I think you can go out and get a trade for him. Again, in maybe some lighter leagues, if you're in some 8 to 10-man leagues, he probably is still on that waiver wire. He might not be rostered. Pick him up. It's going to be a good guy to have moving forward, especially if Kenneth Walker suffers an injury or if they just start trusting Charbonnet more. Next guy as well is Rico Dowdle, man. Kind of had a down week for him. And I'd say that lightly because the last 2 weeks he had over 200 all-purpose yards, which is insanity to think about. And you talked about it last week, Kaushik, because this is a guy that needs to be starting on your roster. It doesn't matter who he plays for, maybe unless you're teams like the Lions or teams like the Colts where you have top 2-3 running backs in the league. But Rico Dowdle, man, had a solid game overall. 17 carries for 79 yards. It's over 4 yards per carry. 1 reception on 2 targets for 17 yards. He had 10.6 fantasy points. So love what I saw out of him, especially with Bryce Young leaving the game and being injured. Overall effective day. We mentioned Ted McMillan hasn't necessarily been super effective, especially in the second half of ball games. Xavier Legette did have a huge game. I think he was their wide receiver 1 this past weekend. I think he finished around 24 fantasy points. But Rico Dowdle's a nice complimentary back. Chuba Hubbard, even though he has that big contract, if this guy is going to be your RB1 and he's showing that he's better as far as yard per carries, he's more effective in the passing game, he's going to be every day or every game he's going to get opportunities, and he can eventually be a 2 to 3 down back week in, week out. And where Chuba is maybe getting those more David Montgomerys, those breather carries, take a series off here and there, but we're still going to give you 65, 70% of the carries overall. You have the opportunity, maybe go trade for him. In some lighter leagues, again, he might not be on some people's squad, but I think in some deeper leagues where people have been a little more savvy, been a little more heads up, they might be willing to trade him if you have some depth at some other positions. And the last guy in this segment before I'm going to turn it over to Kaushik, and that's Jaylen Warren for the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. Nice to see him kind of bounce back. He had his best week of the season so far. 16 carries for 127 yards, to go along with 4 catches on 5 targets for 31 yards, finished with 19.8 fantasy points. Kenneth Gainwell had that absolute monster game a couple weekends ago when they were overseas. Warren was a late, I think, 30 minutes before game time scratch in a game that kicked off at 7:30 a.m. So I think a lot of fantasy owners were absolutely just devastated to see that when they woke up in the morning if they didn't set their alarms to watch that matchup. But to see him come back, have a strong game. We know the Bengals defense is not great. He's going to have a tall task for him this week against the Green Bay Packers, who are top 5 in yards per carry amongst all defenses and total yards or total rushing yards allowed. But I do like him. It looks like they're finally playing some complimentary football in Pittsburgh, where the first 5-6 weeks, it was just all Aaron Rodgers, all passing game. So if they can kind of play that more balanced offense, I don't think they're going to be a 50-50 split. Get into that 60-40 area. This bodes well for Jaylen Warren. And I still think Kenneth Gainwell is going to be there. But I think this is more up to the fact that they're showing that they have other options. And Warren is going to have the ability, as well as we know his passing ability. So that goes right into their hands, as we've seen the trust that Aaron Rodgers built with Aaron Jones all those years. And hopefully Warren can get on the same page as him. However, I'm finished up for the buys. And now Kaushik is going to take it over for the sells. So the floor is yours, my man.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thanks, Charlie. That was a great job on the buys. Let's hit the sells. So we've got the wide receivers first. First guy here is Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Had 3 receptions on 7 targets for 31 yards, total of 6.1 PPR fantasy points. I think the big reason why BTJ is a sell is just the play of Trevor Lawrence overall, and also the fact that BTJ is struggling when it comes to making catches that are contested, right? And I think one hallmark of these WR1s in the league is that they're good at making contested catches where they have bodies around them. They've got guys that are trying to hit them right after the play. And I think just the play of Trevor Lawrence, where he's throwing a lot of what we call quote unquote hospital balls, where he's throwing the ball high, he's getting him hit, he's not throwing the ball very well, and he's just not accurate as a passer. And then to add to that, the fact that BTJ himself is reluctant to go over the middle and make those tough contested catches, I think there's worrying signs here. Travis Hunter scored his first touchdown this week. Could his involvement be on the rise? I think the Jags as a whole, maybe they outplayed the talent of their team and just where their team is in its evolution with Liam Cohn in the first few games. It'll be interesting to see where they go from here. But I think BTJ is a clear sell, and you want to try to get out of him now, because I think these single-digit fantasy points could continue. And at that point, his trade value might even be too low, and you might have to just roster him and hope for some upside gains later on in the season. So good time to get out on BTJ now. See if you can deal him for an RB2 type, maybe a flex type. Next guy is Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. Had 4 catches on 10 targets for 27 yards, 6.7 PPR points. Left the game with a concussion. His status is still day-to-day for the next game. I think the big question here, and a question that I had, because I traded for Nico Collins. I actually just traded him away in a pretty big controversial trade that went down in our league today, or yesterday. And Charlie's shaking his head. It's a pretty big trade. I think the big question here, and I kind of answered it for myself with Nico Collins, is he going to be efficient? Is he going to be a big point producer in this offense? And I think it was a very defiant no for me. CJ Stroud had a great rookie season. No, don't want to take anything away from that. But I think ever since we've moved away from that 1-2 punch with Tank Dell and Nico Collins, this offense has regressed quite a bit. Doesn't help that their top runner, Joe Mixon, is on the shelf and may face an uncertain return timeline, may not even return this season. We don't know if Joe Mixon is going to play football again. And so just given that these guys are maybe a bit more one-dimensional, Nick Chubb, not the greatest at this point in his career. Woody Marks had that big breakout game, but hasn't really been used in the same way, hasn't been as efficient, is more of that pass-catching third down back. And so I think all in all, this is just not a good offense, not somewhere where I want to invest valuable fantasy capital. So again, Nico Collins, still a talented guy, still a WR1, left the game only with a concussion. I think he'll be back, and people may still believe in him as a WR1, WR2. That's not me, and that shouldn't be you as a fantasy manager. I would look to get out on him and see if you can get an RB1, RB2 type, maybe also a better receiver, maybe even a guy like a Devontae Adams, who we know the value might regress a bit once Puka Nacua comes back. All right, last guy here, and he was also part of this trade that I did, is Tet McMillan of the Carolina Panthers. Had 3 receptions on 5 targets for 33 yards, 6.3 PPR points. I think the thing here with Tet is that it seems like he's more involved in the first half of games, and he's completely non-existent in the second half. I think part of that has been the play of Bryce Young. Part of that has been the play of these backs, specifically Rico Dowdle the past few weeks, but also Chuba Hubbard earlier on in the season, where he was being used as a pass-catching back and also getting substantial chunk plays in the running game. And just overall, like this Panthers team, it doesn't seem like it's built to be a high volume weekly passing offense. It doesn't help that Xavier Legette is also stealing some targets, especially in the red zone from Tet McMillan. He scored this week. And so just there's some volatility here with Tet McMillan. Obviously, the upside is great, and the upside could improve with a guy like Andy Dalton coming in, a pocket passer. So we'll have to evaluate where Bryce Young is in his return timeline. But this team at least seems to be somewhat of a contender in this NFC South and in the NFC. And so, maybe there's some upside for Tet to be a weekly WR2 with low-end WR1 upside. And I think that's a reason why a fantasy manager would accept him in a trade. But if you're looking for a guy that's a consistent point producer, I don't think that's Tet McMillan. Look to get out on him. All right, so now we're going to move to our running backs. First guy is Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Had 8 carries for 44 yards and 1 reception on 3 targets for 11 yards, 6.5 PPR points. I think Travis Etienne as a whole has just regressed quite a bit since those early games where he's putting up, I think, in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 points in PPR leagues. I don't think this is a good team. I think this team has, as I mentioned earlier, outperformed expectations early on in the season, the big win coming against the Chiefs at home. But I just don't think that this team overall is using Travis Etienne in the right way. I don't think they are building their offense, just their play calling, everything in the right way. I think it's going to take some time for Trevor Lawrence to adapt. I have some serious questions about whether Trevor Lawrence is the right QB for this team long-term as well. I think that's a separate point. But I think with Travis Etienne, look to get out on him. I don't think he's a good RB2 even option. He's very inconsistent. See if you can go out and package him as part of a trade and maybe scoop up someone else. But I'd look to get out on him. I just don't think the involvement has been there. And I don't see things changing. Tootin is still there. Travis Hunter could have more weekly involvement. So this offense, there's still a lot of volatility, a lot of moving pieces. Next guy is Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about him a little bit earlier. 11 carries for 108 yards and 2 receptions on 4 targets for -8 yards, 13 PPR points. And I think, this is a resurgent game for Chase Brown, right? He's over 100 yards, I think, for the first time this season. And I think many of us, we were reluctant to trade for him for parts of the season because Joe Burrow was out. And Joe Burrow, I think is famous for dumping the ball a lot to Chase Brown over the middle of the field and increasing his PPR usage. And so Chase Brown definitely regressed from that standpoint as a pass catching back. I think that pass catching ability really propelled him to the top of many fantasy rankings earlier on, especially last season and also early on this season, but he wasn't seeing that. I think the point here is this is maybe a bit of a sell high, but a sell high in the sense that we didn't expect Chase Brown to be here, right? He's over 100 yards. I think he's kind of reached his peak value, at least for this season, with the way the Bengals team is set up. And so again, look to package him as part of a trade. Maybe a 1-for-1 trade for an underachieving wide receiver or something like that could work. It depends on your team needs. I'd still try to get out on Chase Brown. I don't think this is sustainable long term. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are still the horses to bet on in that offense. Next guy is David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. 13 carries for 21 yards and 2 receptions on 3 targets for 18 yards, total of 5.9 PPR points. I think this is a sad one, Charlie. This guy has been a dependable guy in this offense. He's been studly at times, right? He had an almost 30-point game against the Ravens earlier on this season, followed that up with almost a 20-point performance against the Bengals. Both road games as well, both critical games for this Lions team to establish their dominance. And I think since then, he's just been regressing. And he's been regressing steadily, and we've seen a clear preference for Jahmyr Gibbs as this more explosive, younger option in this offense. And so again, try to leverage some of those earlier season performances from David Montgomery maybe package him as part of a trade for someone better, or maybe someone that's underachieving, that shouldn't be valued where they are. I'm thinking of guys even like Ashton Genty, right? I know the Las Vegas Raiders, they don't have the greatest offensive line, but I think if anything, Pete Carroll is going to lean even more on the running game, given the struggles of Geno Smith. And Ashton Genty could be a guy that is a smart fit for David Montgomery in a swap, just given the upside and the usage. Finally, is Quinshon Judkins of the Cleveland Browns. 25 carries for 84 yards and 3 touchdowns, 26.4 PPR points. And you guys might be wondering, why is this guy a sell? The answer here is I think he's a sell high, right? Like, we know Quinshon Judkins is a very talented back. The question is, does he keep this up? This is not a very good Browns team. I think this Browns team depends very heavily on Quinshon Judkins. His value is quite high. We've mentioned guys like Justin Jefferson where the value has regressed quite a bit. Even a guy like a DK Metcalf, right? So if you are strapped at wide receiver, or you're looking to really go out and make that in-season move to make a difference for the fantasy playoffs, I would strongly recommend moving Quinshon Judkins for one of those top caliber wide receivers, just because there's a lot more safety with wide receivers than running backs. Running backs get hit a lot. Their tread on the tires gets quite high, just given the usage, and injuries start to mount. And again, this is just not a very good Browns team. And so if you have Quinshon Judkins on your roster, he's your RB2, maybe leave him in there. But if you have depth at the RB position, this is the guy that I'd be looking to sell high on. And with that, he's actually the last guy, Charlie, of this segment. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with our next section, which is the watch list, and also the games to look forward to for the next week. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, awesome, guys. We're back for our final segment. We're going to start out with the watch list here, and then we're going to go to games to look forward to for the upcoming week before we break. All right, so first guy, Arondé Gadsden, tight end for the Los Angeles Chargers. We talked about him earlier. 7 receptions on 9 targets for 164 yards and 1 touchdown, 30.4 PPR points. I think we already mentioned that this is a guy that you're looking to pick up. I think the watch list part of this is just to watch his week-to-week involvement. I think the main question that many of us have now is, can he sustainably continue as a TE1 in this offense? Because we've seen this with many guys, right? Like, they go off for 1 week, 2 weeks, and then they regress. Guys like Rico Dowdle, right, had 30 fantasy points week after week with Chuba Hubbard out, regressed immediately. And so this is still a passing offense with many mouths to feed in LA. So this is a guy that you definitely want to pick up, but you don't want to mortgage the farm when it comes to fab, when it comes to even trades, to go and get him. Don't give up everything. But yeah, just watch his involvement week over week, see how he performs in this offense, and kind of decide what you're doing with your tight end slot, or maybe even one of your flex spots moving forward. But definitely a guy I'd look to pick up. Just watch him week to week.
Yeah, I really, really like him. But as you mentioned, dude, the involvement is kind of a little bit iffy with him, especially with how much talent and wealth they have at the wide receiver position. We know with Omarion Hampton being out, Najee Harris being out, the running back room is incredibly thin. The tight end room doesn't have a lot of support there. But if you're already deep at that position, like you mentioned, go out, have a flex. There's no reason to go spend a lot of money on this guy, especially as a rookie. Even though he had a big game these last 2 weeks, he's still unproven in our books. So don't be super hasty. Be a little more just kind of chill on him. As you mentioned, monitor. And I think the next guy is kind of in the same boat that you're about to talk about as well.
Absolutely. And that's Chris Moore of the Washington Commanders. He had 2 receptions on 5 targets for 59 yards. Nothing crazy stat line wise, 7.9 PPR fantasy points. I think the big notes here are that Deebo Samuel is hurt, and that's a situation to monitor. He's been their WR1 for a good chunk of the season, with Terry McLaurin missing, I think, the mandatory mini camp and also the training camp at the beginning of the season due to his contract and also due to an injury. And then Terry McLaurin has also been out due to his own injury issues. And so Chris Moore has really stepped up as that big body on the outside, that trusted target for Marcus Mariota, as well as Jaden Daniels. I know he didn't have the stat line to back it up in what was a very ugly game for this team, but I think he could end up being the go-to guy behind Zach Ertz in this offense. The big thing to watch here, right, is just the health of Deebo Samuel. How does Terry McLaurin reacclimate in this offense? And now, given that Jaden Daniels is out, how do these guys kind of gel with Marcus Mariota, who could be making another start here, depending on the health of Jaden Daniels? And so just some things to monitor, lots of moving pieces in this offense, but could be a very sneaky waiver wire addition for your team.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really like him. I think with the Cliffs Kingsbury offense, that anybody can really be effective in there, similar to Kyle Shanahan. Just a really good offensive coordinator and play caller as a whole. So it doesn't really matter. It's more of a plug and play situation. We've seen that down in Tampa Bay as well, even with the absence of Liam Cohen. But I think what I really, really want to see out of him is, can he stay healthy? I don't know what's been going on with the situation with the wide receiver room in Washington. But I mean, to have 2 receptions on 5 targets for 59 yards, a 7.9 fantasy points. The only other real threat at the moment, if those other 2 wide receivers are out, is Zach Ertz. We know Marcus Mariota doesn't necessarily have a strong arm. He's been more of a check down merchant, even dating back to his days when he was with Tennessee, with Vegas sparingly. So I really, really like Chris Moore, but don't go out and spend. You could probably get him on the waiver wire. Um, the next guy I think you're going to talk about, I think is going to get everybody excited, especially people in your city.
Absolutely. Let's give some love to Chicago. Kyle Manungai, running back for the Chicago Bears, had 13 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown. Also had 2 receptions on 3 targets for 13 yards, a total of 17.4 PPR points. I think the big thing here, we knew this guy was talented, right? But we knew that he was going to be behind DeAndre Swift in this offense. With the commitment that we're now seeing to the running game in this Ben Johnson offense, and knowing what Ben Johnson did with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in Detroit, this could again be a very sneaky waiver wire addition for your team, especially given that at times DeAndre Swift has also been inefficient, right? He's been a guy that, he goes off for a couple of games, but then all of a sudden he disappears. And so if there are performance concerns with DeAndre Swift, I think Kyle Manungai could easily be that guy that steps in. He was very efficient on the ground this week, had some passing game involvement as well. And if the Bears are playing from ahead, who would have thought we said that, right? The Bears are actually playing quite well this season. If the Bears are playing from ahead, Kyle Manungai could be a find and could be a keeper for your team.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that Bears and playing ahead go together. I don't think I've heard that since the Jay Cutler, Brian Urlacher days. And even when they had Mitch Trubisky and they won the division and lost to the Eagles on the infamous double doink, they weren't necessarily a dominant offensive team. They were more led by their defense, and defense won the ball games. But now their defense is solid, but you could argue that their running or their offense is just on par, if not slightly a little bit better. The rushing attack is coming into form. We know DeAndre Swift has not necessarily been an elite running back. He's been effective, but there is a reason that the Eagles moved on from him and he's now with Chicago. But Manungai, man, I was super high on him. I know I stashed him in one of my dynasty leagues because I really, really like the enticing aspect of, okay, he's going to be a young running back, unproven, in a new system with young wide receiving corps, young head coach, young QB. So there's a lot of promise and upside for him to get those opportunities, and he's slowly starting to show those, man. I mean, 17.4 fantasy points is a great option for him. If you're in a dynasty league, maybe keep him stashed, start to creep him up. If you're in those redraft leagues that we talk about primarily in this fantasy podcast, definitely have him ready to start, especially if Swift were to go down, or if you see that target or that, carry share start to tilt Manungai's way, maybe get to those 55-45 areas. Overall, could not be even happier for him. And the next guy, dude, I'm super psyched about as well, because he's going to get a lot of opportunities, albeit it's been because of unfortunate injuries to his counterparts.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to round out this section, we've got Tez Johnson of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Had 4 receptions on 9 targets for 58 yards and a touchdown, 15.8 PPR fantasy points. The big notes here, Mike Evans, probably done for the season. I think he had a broken clavicle, it sounded like. And so I think he's going to be out. Unfortunate for Mike Evans, he's had that streak, I think, of like 10 or 11 seasons now with 1,000 yards receiving. So it breaks my heart to see that Mike Evans is not going to achieve that this season. But looks like, father time catches up, right? We talk about this with players all the time. When does father time catch up? And it looks like maybe Mike Evans's time is knocking. Chris Godwin has always been banged up throughout his career. So nothing to write home about yet there. We haven't really seen too much of Chris Godwin. Ibuka, we know Ibuka is going to be a star. He's dealing with a hamstring injury right now too. And I know Bucky Irving is out. And so after all of that, you look and it's next man up, and Tez Johnson is the guy waiting in the wings. Again, this is a guy you probably have added or, maybe traded for. I don't think anybody's really trading for him right now, though. But you probably added him off of waivers. But this is, again, just a reminder, like, keep him on that watch list. monitor his involvement, monitor his usage, monitor what this team's passing attack looks like. It could change a bit given Bucky Irving is probably making his return soon, given that Chris Godwin will probably play a factor. Cade Otton as well. We mentioned him last week. So this is still a passing attack with, a bunch of talent. But Tez Johnson seems to be a go-to guy for Baker. He seems to like him. Baker seems to be playing, pretty well with any guy on the outside, and it looks like Tez Johnson's turn. So definitely a guy to watch for the remainder of the season, given where this team is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the myriad of injuries that you mentioned kind of is what's going to boost his value moving forward. I know he's one of the younger receivers on that team as well. But again, one of those plug and play offenses. Didn't have like the most elite game as far as receptions on targets, but still probably their best game from a receiving standpoint from anybody else on their team. Ibuka is banged up right now. You mentioned Bucky Irving being out. We already know Chris Godwin has kind of been in and out as he has been the last 3 or 4 years, even dating back to when Brady was still the QB there. Evans, unfortunately, as you mentioned, broken clavicle, broken collarbone. He's going to miss out on that 1,000-yard season that I think he had been going for the last 9 years. So unfortunately, that streak's most likely going to be broken unless he sees a crazy game. But Tez Johnson overall, man, happy for him. Next man up in this offense, getting every opportunity he can. It's been incredibly positive to see that he's already building the connection with Baker. It shows that the trust Baker has in him, as well as the trust Todd Bowles and the entire coaching staff has to just throw him out there, give him some opportunities, and he's not just being used as a decoy in that system. And I think moving forward, definitely have to keep him on the watch list. Mentioned being a waiver pickup. I really, really like the idea of that, especially if he gets those certain matchups against a bad defensive team with a poor secondary, or even if Ibuka goes out, which we've already seen has happened this year, then they're going to have somebody to have to throw to on the outside that isn't Cade Otton. So really like him, and I'm excited, dude. The next segment we're going to get into is getting me hyped, Kaushik.
Absolutely, Charlie. We've got your team as the first one, right? We're looking at games to look forward to for the next week. We got Green Bay Packers at Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, the big storyline here is Aaron Rodgers' first game against his former franchise. Was that franchise quarterback for Green Bay for very many years. So can this Green Bay offense also, despite the Rodgers storyline, despite the emotions there, can they wake up, right? We mentioned this a bit earlier when we were talking about Jordan Love. We know Josh Jacobs is going to get his. But, who else is going to step up for this team? We've seen that Pittsburgh has been getting beat outside as well. Wide receivers on the outside have been stepping up against them. So is this a week where a Romeo Doubs or Matthew Golden goes off, has that big breakout game, but big breakout performance? Do they trust Jordan Love to throw the ball down the field against this pass rush? I think that's going to be paramount for them to win this game. They can't completely rely on Josh Jacobs because we know Aaron Rodgers is going to be motivated. He's going to be finding his guys on that side of the ball, and he's going to be putting up points. So this should be a fun one. Curious to hear your thoughts as well, Charlie.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited. I mean, it's bittersweet, dude. Aaron Rodgers kind of said it best. He didn't have any animosity coming back on this game. Obviously, he has it scheduled, and he's had it penciled since the schedule was released. Anybody saying otherwise, even himself, would be insane. But as a Packers fan, man, I'm really, really happy for him. I think the last 2 years with the Jets were just it was just bad taste in my mouth. It didn't make me feel good. It reminded me when Brett Favre went back to the Vikings overall, because it was like, what are you doing, dude? Spiteful. Aaron Rodgers wasn't going to the Jets out of spite. He just wanted an opportunity, and the team gave an opportunity. They ditched the old man to the side, and I'm thankful Mike Tomlin and the entire Pittsburgh kind of area and fan base has embraced him. From a Packers fan, I know it's in Pittsburgh, and I saw some crazy stat that I don't think they've won in Pittsburgh in like 25, 30 years. So that doesn't bode well for us. We haven't, I think the last time I truly felt good about them was when we beat them in the Super Bowl in 2010. But overall, dude, can the secondary stay healthy? Keyshawn Nixon's going to have his hands full versus DK Metcalf. Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, they're going to have their hands full as well with Pat Freiermuth and Johnny Smith. We know how they like to force feed the tight ends. I'm not worried about the rushing attack. I know we talked about Jaylen Warren in that bye segment. The rushing defense has been absolutely elite. I think Arizona this last week was the first time Green Bay's defense had allowed any first quarter points going into the season. So I really, really like it. On the flip side of things, I already talked about it with Jordan Love when you mentioned the loser segment, is can they score points? Can they actually put their foot down? They have an opportunity against a porous Pittsburgh defense to put up a lot of points. Josh Jacobs is obviously going to be the focal point in this offense, but I want to see them air it out. I want to see them get the ball downfield. I want to see them attack Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey got ate up. I know he was going against the elite receivers and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but I really think that Matt LaFleur's scheme gives them the ability to do that. I want to see them get Tucker Kraft more involved. I'd like to see him get around 5 to 7 receptions. Matthew Golden is probably going to be the number one cover guy in this offense right now because I don't think Dontavian Wicks is playing. I know Christian Watson is still out. And then I think Romeo Doubs might be up in the air. You're going to see some Savion Williams, maybe even some Malik Heath again. But I could not be even any more excited, dude. I've had this game penciled on my schedule since the schedule was released and since I saw Rodgers was getting signed. And like I said, I think bittersweet is the best way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, lots of emotions going into that game. Should be fun. Hopefully it's a high-scoring game as well and ends in a thrilling finish. But there's a lot of good storylines on both sides of the ball. You've got great defenses, and I think that could be the X factor. I know a lot of us are looking at the quarterbacks, but I think these defenses, who's going to get that one additional stop in crunch time? You've got Micah Parsons against TJ Watt. Lots of fun storylines there. Should be a fun one. All right, so next game here, we're staying in the NFC North with another team. My team, now adopted team, Chicago Bears at Baltimore Ravens. This is going to be an interesting game. I think the Bears, again, we said it, are looking like potential world beaters or potential spoilers in this NFC. They've won 4 straight games. Ben Johnson is piecing it together. He is running this operation, right? He's the head coach and the play caller. It seems like Caleb Williams and these guys are buying in. They're getting more out of the running game. So Caleb Williams is having to do less, having to play less hero ball. We've seen that because Rome Odunze's numbers, DJ Moore's numbers, Luther Burden's numbers haven't been the best the past few weeks. Also, their tight ends, Colson Loveland and Cole Kmet, they haven't been like monster numbers in the way that we're used to seeing. And I think this is a good sign for this Bears team, right? You've got a quarterback now who can take care of the football, understands the system. You've got now a two-headed monster with Swift and Monangai, guys that can eat up yardage on the ground, control the clock. And now you're walking into Baltimore. And I think the big storyline here is, what does Lamar Jackson look like in his first game back since injuring his hamstring in the first half against the Chiefs in week 4? This is not a good situation for the Ravens. This is not where we thought this team would be. This is a perennial playoff contender. Many of us thought the Ravens could win the Super Bowl this year. And, as more and more games go on, I know Cooper Rush started several games for them. The signs just get worse. And this is a kind of must-win game for the Ravens fairly early on in the season, or else this season could be a lost one. And so I think some interesting storylines there. And also the other big one is, when is the Ravens defense going to step up? The Chicago Bears have been generous on defense, but it feels like they're able to get those clutch stops in key moments. This will be a good test for them against a quality offense, quality quarterback. But yeah, again, defenses could be an X factor here. Excited to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, I think if there was any more reason to boost Lamar Jackson's MVP case from last season, all you need to do is just look at the last 3 weeks. This guy is the reason their offense hums. He's the reason their team goes as far as it did. Again, you mentioned the defense has been absolutely atrocious. I don't know what's happened to their defense. This team was known for that defense when Joe Flacco was there, even in the early 2000s when they won with Trent Dilfer. Their last 24 years leading up to this season, the Baltimore Ravens have been known for their elite defense, and then offense just comes along the way. And as long as they're not turning the ball over, that's what they're there for. And they're just going to put up enough points. They're going to get the crucial stops. They're going to turn it over when it matters most. But right now, dude, it doesn't look like they can do anything right. You just mentioned the Bears have put up over 200 yards versus the Saints, rushing yards, that is. Can they stop them on that end? Because this is not a game you want to play from behind, especially with Lamar working his way back from injury. And that being a lower leg injury, when he's been known for his escapability and ability to get out in the pocket or outside of the pocket and create plays, misdirections, as well as what are they called, off-time plays, just stuff like that. I want to see if Derrick Henry looks a little more comfortable having his man back. Where does Zay Flowers fit in this equation? We know the Bears secondary is susceptible to kind of those deep passes. Is Zay Flowers actually going to be effective? Now, the other end is Ben Johnson. I think what they're going to try and do is, because of how bad the Ravens offense has looked at times, even when Lamar was out there outside of that week 1 game versus the Bills, I think if they win the toss, he's going to take it immediately. He's going to say, we're going to go out, we're going to score first. We've seen how effective the Bears are when they have those scripted drives. to begin the first quarter, or if they get deferred and they're going to the third quarter, they're scoring at an incredibly high rate with those. They've won 4 straight, man. They're looking elite right now. It pains me to say that being a Packers fan, but I have to give credit where credit's due, dude. And the Bears look like a fringe wild card, even potentially, as you mentioned, kind of an upset piece to make a playoff push. And this is going to be another test for them on the road. So really, really excited, man.
Charlie, you'll be happy. We usually chant Packers suck after Bears win. So just throwing that one in there for you. That's usually the chant in tunnels. So yeah, just throwing that there for you so you could feel at home with us. We're very happy as Bears fans. And I also like what we did here, Charlie, with the games to look forward to, because we've got your adopted home team in the Packers. We've talked about them. My adopted home team in the Bears. And finally, our home team, right? Because we met each other in Colorado, the Denver Broncos. We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys and Denver Broncos and touch up on that before we head out for this week. This is going to be a pivotal matchup. This is a fun matchup as well. We've seen that the Denver Broncos, they've been generous in terms of their defense. We thought many of us thought this would be a top 3, maybe top 2 defense, just given the talent on that side of the ball, led by guys like PS2, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, Dre Greenlaw. Looks like Dre Greenlaw actually might be suspended for chasing an official down in the last game. So yeah, absolutely crazy suspension. Saw that today. Absolutely crazy thing. He chased him down after the game and might be suspended. So that could be a critical loss, right? Javonte Williams has been very effective. Jake Ferguson has been a quality option for them at tight end. And so don't sleep on this Cowboys team. We've seen this. Dak is playing at a very, very high level, MVP caliber level, has really uplifted this team week after week. And so this is going to be a true test for this Broncos team. I know they've had the Cowboys number both in Dallas and at home, but again, they had almost a couple of letdowns the past couple of weeks, right? Against Justin Fields, against Jackson Dart. So does that catch up with them this week? Or are they able to put their foot down early and finish off the Cowboys? Of course, the Cowboys, we don't have to talk too much about them. They've got so much skill talent, Charlie. CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Javonte Williams. And let's also throw in Jake Ferguson now, along with Dak Prescott. Probably one of the best 5-somes in the league, if not the best. These guys are a elite combination, right? They can move the ball down the field. Dak is incredibly accurate. He is finding his guys with precision. And this is a must-win game for the Cowboys. Don't forget, they had that tie game early in the season. I think they're 3-3-1 coming into this game. And so, this is a must-win game. Every game is must-win. I know the Eagles look a little bit vulnerable and could actually fall to the Giants because the Giants have had their number this season. But yeah, this is a must-win game for the Cowboys, right? They're going to come in here. They're going to lay their best punch. I worry about the defense for the Cowboys. I think that's where the Broncos really have an edge, even though their defense has also been generous, because the Broncos defense usually elevates when they play against better competition, right? Like that's just the reality. I've seen this with this team. They played the Jets, the Giants past few weeks. They locked down the Jets. They had several sacks in that game, but Giants, I think they kind of, that emotions of winning in London, they had a letdown. This could be a reset game for this defense. Cowboys defense wise, I don't know if I see them consistently stopping Bo Nix in this team. Bo Nix is an incredibly accurate guy outside of the pocket. Sean is going to get him outside the pocket, design throws in the flat to running backs, down the field on play actions to guys like Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin and even Marvin Mims. And so it's going to be a fun game, could be a high-scoring game, another close game for this team. But I think I have trust in the Broncos. I know we don't normally pick games. I think I have trust in the Broncos to maybe eke this one out. But again, CeeDee Lamb's my boy. I hope he goes off. If the Cowboys win, hopefully he does well.
I mean, yeah, I think what you said that stood out to me a lot there was the fact that the Broncos cannot play around. This team is definitely better offensively than the Giants. We already watched them put up was a 40 to 37 when Russell Wilson threw for over 400 yards and the Cowboys eked it out in overtime. I just think with the Broncos, dude, they play around with their food a little too much. They remind me of the Packers that instance. And it's almost like they've had the 2 largest fourth quarter comebacks in the NFL this season, which is great. That shows they can pick themselves off the mat. They can get back into the swing of things, shows they have the ability to turn it on. But you don't want to be one of those teams that flips a switch per se, because when you get into the playoffs and you're playing every team that has the scouting, has the game reports, they're all healthy. This isn't going to work long term. And on the flip side, dude, defensively, can the Broncos slow down a higher powered offense? We talked about CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. They're going against the best cornerback duo in the NFL. But those cornerbacks are also going against what you could argue is the best wide receiver duo in the NFL, at least so far this season through 7 weeks. Dak Prescott is disgusting, dude. He's playing at an MVP level right now. Their rushing room has kind of regressed a little bit, but I don't think that's necessarily because of Javonte Williams' play. I think it's more due to the aspect of just the wide receivers kind of coming to their own, getting more acclimated. Jake Ferguson being the number 1 tight end in fantasy right now, so the passing game hasn't given them a reason to have to be a 60-40 rushing attack. I do think Bo Nix is going to cook, man. We saw what he did in the fourth quarter, 33 points, not only throwing the ball to Cortland Sutton, you mentioned Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims, but actually escaping the pocket, knowing when to get down. I actually think he had a rushing touchdown in that game as well. I could be wrong, though. But go ahead if you're going to touch in real quick.
Yeah. I think Bo Nix had 2 rushing touchdowns.
Okay, game. That's what it is.
So yes. He was crazy on the ground, yeah.
Yeah, he was elite on the ground. So this is going to be a huge game. I think Denver Broncos, what helps them most is they are playing at the elevation. I know that's kind of a people make fun of that and they don't understand it. But when you go to the games here, man, and you live in Denver, you actually see that. So if the Broncos are scoring points and that Dallas defense is on the field a long time, it's going to be incredibly tough for them to stay up. And I know we don't pick games a lot, but as a Cowboys hater, I'll admit it. I'm going to have to go with the hometown Broncos in this one, dude. And I think that's going to finish it up for us. And really, really appreciate you, brother. I'm glad we could get this done again. As always, it's amazing to do this with you. It's a blessing that we have the opportunity to forge this relationship and do something we're both incredibly passionate about. To everybody who listens to us, we really thank you for that. And we hope you stay tuned for our next episode. Kaushik, got any final words?
Yeah, no, thanks, brother. It's been great working with you on this. It's so special that we get to share this time together and talk about one of our favorite things, which is sports and football. And I think another great week for us. Thank you also to all of our viewers. We really appreciate you guys for tuning in weekly. Please share this with your friends. Share it with other people that you know, even coworkers, family members, whoever that watches football or cares about sports. This is something Charlie and I work very hard at, to create this content and to produce something original every week where it's our actual organic reflections of players. And so we really appreciate that, this gets spread to as many sporting fans as possible. And we do this every week on Spotify. I think we skipped 1 week. We took a break, but we've been at this every week. And so really would appreciate it from a creator perspective of just supporting us. But yeah, Charlie, likewise, man. So grateful for you. So grateful for the friendship that we have. It's so fun doing these week after week. And I hope we can keep it moving. And I'm glad that we ended with both of us predicting a Broncos win. What a way to go. And hopefully Broncos country, let's ride, right? As Mr. Unlimited would say, Mr. Russell Wilson sitting somewhere. So.
Mr. Unlimited, brother. And we're out, man. So we appreciate you all once again, and have a great rest of your night. And until next week.
Awesome, guys. Peace. Thank you so much. Take care.